Tonight, we embark on a gentle journey designed to carry you deep into natural rest and plant the seeds of profound peace within your consciousness. There is truly nothing you need to achieve here. These are not intellectual lessons or rigid techniques to master or memorize. Rather, they are timeless truths intended to softly guide you back to the sanctuary of peace that has always resided inside you. Wooden shelves meticulously carved by master craftsmen reached from the floor high up to the ceiling. Each delicate scroll was wrapped in fine silk and stored with meticulous, careful reverence. The air in the room was always permeated with the scent of cedar and aged paper, and morning light filtered gently through paper windows, casting a sacred, golden glow over centuries of accumulated wisdom. Kassen would spend his early hours each day immersed in this sacred space, reading by candlelight long before the other monks awakened. One fateful autumn night, while the community slept soundly, a terrible fire swept unexpectedly through the monastery. The flames, whipped by strong mountain winds, moved with frightening, consuming speed. Though the monks miraculously managed to escape safely, there was absolutely no time to save anything else. They stood shivering in the courtyard, watching helplessly as their beloved home was violently consumed. The library, filled with dry, ancient materials, burned with particular, horrific intensity. All those ancient texts, irreplaceable manuscripts, and precious scrolls, the work of 40 years, turned entirely to ash in minutes. 40 years of careful collecting vanished in a single, devastating night. As the cold dawn broke over the smoldering ruins, the monks gathered around their teacher, expecting, naturally, to find him utterly devastated by this immense, unimaginable loss. Instead, they found Kassen sitting utterly calmly on a cool stone, watching the smoke drift lazily from the place where his beloved library had stood. His serene face showed no trace of anger, crippling grief, or even regret. One young monk, unable to contain his raw confusion, approached Kassen with tears streaming down his face. "Master," the student said, his voice raw and breaking with emotion, "how can you possibly be so peaceful? All those precious teachings, all those decades of dedicated work, everything is gone. Doesn't this monumental loss break your heart?" Kassen looked up at his student with eyes full of gentle, boundless compassion. "My dear friend," he said softly, "those books contained wonderful words about the truth, but they were not the truth itself. The real Dharma was never written on paper or stored on shelves. It lives here," and he lightly touched his chest. And here, he gestured gently toward his student's heart. "Fire cannot consume what is truly precious." The young monk persisted, struggling to understand. "But Master, think of all the irreplaceable wisdom that is lost forever. Future generations will never be able to read those magnificent texts." Kassen smiled peacefully, his gaze distant. "The fire has actually given us a profound and great teaching. It has vividly shown us the crucial difference between the finger pointing at the moon and the moon itself. We spent so much time polishing and protecting the finger, the physical books, that we sometimes forgot to look up at what it was pointing toward, the living truth." He stood slowly and placed a gentle, grounding hand on the young monk's shoulder. "Yesterday I was primarily the keeper of books. Today I am simply a teacher. Yesterday I worried constantly about preserving old wisdom. Today I am free to embody it directly. The fire has not taken anything essential away. It has merely revealed what was always here." Over the following days, as the community began the difficult process of rebuilding, something truly remarkable happened. Without the immense distraction of managing and protecting his vast collection, Kassen's teaching became more direct, immediate, and powerful than ever before. Students who had traveled expecting to pore over ancient texts instead encountered a living, breathing embodiment of the wisdom those texts had only tried to capture. The master had suddenly discovered that his attachment to preserving the physical dharma had in subtle ways prevented him from fully expressing the spiritual dharma. The fire had freed him from being merely a curator of truth and allowed him to become truth itself. This moving story illuminates something profound about the true nature of acceptance in Zen practice. True acceptance is absolutely not about liking what happens to us. Kassen did not celebrate the fire or pretend he was joyful about losing his life's work. Instead, he simply accepted the unchangeable reality of what had occurred and immediately opened himself to whatever profound wisdom that reality might contain. In Zen, we learn that resistance to what has already happened, fighting the past, is the single greatest source of our deepest human suffering. We waste precious energy fighting battles that were already won or irrevocably lost. When we finally stop this futile struggle against reality, we instantly discover an inner freedom and resilience that no external circumstance can ever touch. The fire in this story powerfully represents all the unexpected losses and seismic changes that life inevitably brings us. Sometimes it burns away our cherished plans, our familiar identities, or our most treasured possessions. Our very first instinct is to see these events as undeniable tragedies, as enemies of our happiness. But Zen compels us to look much deeper. What if every major loss is simultaneously a powerful liberation? What if the things that burned away were only binding us? Kassen discovered that his attachment to preserving wisdom had paradoxically become an obstacle to embodying it. The fire freed him from being a keeper of truth and allowed him to become truth itself. This teaching extends its reach to every area of our lives. When we lose a job we thought defined us, we might suddenly discover hidden talents we never knew we possessed. When a relationship ends, we might find a new capacity for solitude and self-reliance that fundamentally strengthens us. When illness limits our physical abilities, we might develop inner spiritual resources that are far more valuable than anything physical. The practice of acceptance begins with one simple, undeniable recognition: what has already happened has already happened. Our internal resistance cannot, by any means, change the past, but our wholehearted acceptance can entirely transform our future. When we stop fighting what is, we become fully available to what might be. Take another gentle breath now. Feel how your body naturally relaxes when you stop bracing against imaginary or past threats. This is the authentic physical sensation of acceptance. Not collapse, but a wise, strong yielding that perfectly conserves your energy for what truly matters. Let us now turn our attention to another powerful story that reveals how acceptance can transform even our relationship with imperfection itself. There was once a young student named Daiki who came to study at a mountain monastery known throughout the land for its exquisitely maintained gardens. He had always been intensely drawn to flawless beauty and precision, and he hoped that learning to tend these famous grounds would bring him closer to enlightenment. He imagined spending his days among perfectly arranged flowers, geometrically precise pathways, and trees pruned into ideal textbook forms. On his very first morning, the head gardener, an elderly monk named Sosin, led Daiki on a tour of the grounds. They walked through sections of remarkable, formal beauty where everything seemed to grow in perfect harmony. Cherry trees formed elegant, precise arches over stone pathways. Moss-covered rocks were arranged in patterns that looked almost intentional. Streams flowed with gentle, musical sounds over carefully placed stones. But as they continued their walk, they came to a section that seemed entirely forgotten or neglected. Here, plants grew wild and seemingly random. Weeds pushed aggressively up between the stones. Branches grew in odd, sprawling directions. At the center of this unkempt area stood an ancient pine tree that had been twisted and violently bent by decades of harsh mountain storms. Its trunk curved dramatically in 3 directions, Its branches reached out at strange, awkward angles, and its bark was heavily scarred and weathered. Daiki looked at the tree with obvious distaste. "Master Sosin," he said, "surely this old tree mars the intended beauty of your garden. Why don't you simply remove it and plant something more pleasing? Something that grows straight and strong like the other elegant pines?" Sosin stopped walking and gazed at the gnarled, twisted tree with obvious, profound affection. "This tree," he said quietly, "is my greatest teacher. It has shown me something vital that all the perfect specimens could never reveal." Daiki looked confused. What could this damaged tree possibly teach that a healthy, straight one cannot? The old gardener walked closer to the twisted pine and placed his weathered hand gently on its gnarled bark. "This tree has been here for over 200 years. It has survived brutal storms that destroyed younger, straighter trees. It has bent profoundly without ever breaking, adapting year after year without losing its essential, wild nature. Every curve in its trunk tells a long story of pure resilience. Every twisted branch speaks of a creative response to immense difficulty." He looked at his young student with eyes full of warmth. "The straight trees in the formal garden are beautiful, yes, but their beauty is often dependent on perfect, controlled conditions. They must be protected from strong winds, given ideal soil, and pruned regularly to maintain their shape. This old pine, however, has found its own unique way to be beautiful despite imperfect conditions, perhaps even because of them." Sosin led Daiki to a stone bench facing the tree and invited him to sit. "For the next week," he instructed, "I want you to spend 1 hour each morning simply sitting with this tree. Don't try to fix it or improve it. Don't judge it or wish it were different. Simply be fully present with it exactly as it is." Daiki felt deeply disappointed. He had come to learn about creating flawless beauty, not contemplating what he initially saw as an eyesore. But he trusted his teacher and reluctantly agreed to the practice. The first morning was difficult and frustrating. Daiki sat reluctantly, his mind immediately filled with criticism. The tree looked irrevocably broken to him, a symbol of everything that goes wrong when things are not properly maintained. He spent most of the hour mentally planning how the garden could be significantly improved once this unsightly specimen was removed. But as the days slowly passed, something fundamental began to shift in his perception. On the third morning, he noticed how the rising light caught the deep grooves in the bark, creating intricate patterns of shadow and illumination that were unexpectedly beautiful. On the fourth day, he saw how a small, diligent bird had built its nest securely in one of the tree's twisted branches, utilizing the unusual angles for robust protection and support. By the end of the week, Daiki found himself truly looking forward to his morning time with the tree. He began to see that its twisted, gnarled form was not a failure to grow properly, but a masterpiece of adaptation. Every bend and curve was the tree's ingenious, creative response to the particular environmental challenges it had faced. No straight tree, he realized, could tell such a rich story of survival and resilience. On the final morning, as Daiki sat in his usual spot, Sosin joined him. "What has the tree taught you?" the old master asked softly. Daiki was quiet for a long moment before responding. "It has taught me that there are different kinds of beauty. The formal gardens are beautiful like a perfect, measured poem. But this tree is beautiful like a wise, old face that openly shows its history. I came here wanting to learn how to make things perfect, but the tree has shown me how to find perfection in things exactly as they are." Sosin nodded approvingly. "The tree grows entirely according to its nature and its circumstances. It doesn't try to be a different tree. It simply responds to each moment with complete authenticity. This is the deepest teaching of Zen. Not to force ourselves or our world into predetermined, rigid shapes, but to find the natural perfection that effortlessly emerges when we stop fighting what is." This story reveals another crucial layer of acceptance that is fundamental to Zen understanding. We often mistakenly think acceptance means merely tolerating what we don't like. But true acceptance goes far deeper. It means discovering that what we initially resist may contain exactly the wisdom or profound beauty we need for growth. Daiki's journey from instinctive criticism to deep appreciation mirrors our own internal process of learning to accept not just external circumstances, but those aspects of ourselves that we harshly judge as flawed or inadequate. Like the twisted pine, we all carry scars from the storms we have weathered. We all have aspects of our personality or history that don't match our idealized self-image. Zen teaches us that these apparent imperfections are not obstacles to our awakening. They are the very raw material from which true awakening emerges. Our struggles become our strength. Our wounds become sources of deep compassion. Our limitations become doorways to surprising creativity and resourcefulness. The twisted tree survived storms that destroyed straighter trees precisely because it learned how to bend. In the exact same way, our capacity to accept and work with our imperfections often makes us more resilient and authentic than those who have never been tested by difficulty. This teaching transforms how we relate to everything in our lives that seems less than ideal. The difficult relationship that ultimately teaches us patience. The health challenge that fiercely shows us what truly matters. The failure that redirects us toward our genuine path. When we stop demanding that life conform perfectly to our preferences, we become available to receive its actual, unexpected gifts. The practice of this deeper acceptance begins with curiosity rather than knee-jerk judgment. When you encounter something in yourself or your current circumstances that you desperately want to change, pause first. Ask sincerely what this situation might be trying to teach you. How might it be perfectly suited to your growth, even if it does not match your current preferences? This, importantly, does not mean becoming passive or avoiding all effort to improve conditions. The gardener still diligently tends his formal gardens with great care and skill. But he also deeply appreciates the wild beauty that emerges when nature is allowed to follow its own profound wisdom. As you rest now, feel into this teaching. Notice any areas of your life where you have been subconsciously fighting what is, demanding that reality conform rigidly to your expectations. What would it feel like to approach these situations with the curiosity and appreciation that Daiki learned to bring to the twisted tree? Breathe gently and let this wisdom settle into your body like nourishing rain, soaking deeply into parched earth. Tomorrow's challenges will still certainly be there, but you need not meet them with resistance. You can meet them with the flexible strength of the ancient pine, bending without breaking, finding your own authentic way to thrive. Let yourself rest completely in this understanding. Acceptance is not defeat or giving up. It is the foundation for all genuine transformation. When we stop fighting reality, we become fully available to dance with it. And in this dance, we discover possibilities we could never have imagined when we were struggling stubbornly against the current. Deep sleep comes naturally to a mind that has learned to accept what is. Rest deeply knowing that you are perfectly positioned to receive whatever teachings tomorrow gracefully brings. A young monk named Jiro lived in a monastery nestled high in the mountains where the air was thin and crystal clear. Every morning before dawn, he would walk down a winding stone path to collect fresh water from a natural spring. The path was treacherous, often covered with loose rocks and featuring steep drops on one side, but Jiro had made this long journey hundreds of times. One morning, as he carefully made his way down the mountain, he noticed something beautiful glinting in the early light. Half buried beneath a fallen log was a small, perfectly smooth river stone. But this was no ordinary stone. It seemed to glow with a quiet inner light, and its surface was marked with natural, delicate patterns that looked almost like ancient writing. Jiro picked up the stone and felt a strange, comforting warmth spread through his hands. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. Surely, this was a sign, a profound gift from the universe meant specifically for him. He tucked the stone carefully and secretly into his robe and continued to the spring. Over the following days, Jiro found himself constantly touching the stone in his pocket. During meditation, he would hold it secretly in his palm. While working in the garden, he would frequently check to make sure it was still safely nestled in his robes. At meals, he would feel for its reassuring weight. The stone began to occupy more and more of his thoughts. He would lie awake at night wondering about its mystical origins. Was it truly magical? Did it possess special powers? He started to believe that his meditation was deeper when he held it, that his work went more smoothly when it was near. But inevitably, with this growing attachment came crippling worry. What if he lost it? What if someone discovered it and tried to take it away? Jiro began taking longer, more secretive routes to avoid the other monks. He started checking his pocket dozens of times each day. The very thing that had initially brought him sudden joy now filled his life with constant, subtle anxiety. One morning, as Jiro hurried along the mountain path with his heavy water buckets, his foot caught suddenly on a loose stone. He stumbled violently and fell hard, water splashing everywhere. As he scrambled frantically to collect the scattered buckets, he heard a small, chilling sound that made his heart stop. The gentle clink of stone striking rock. His precious, guarded stone had fallen from his robes and was now rolling swiftly toward the cliff edge. Jiro lunged after it desperately, but he was too late. The stone tumbled over the precipice and disappeared instantly into the misty valley far below. Jiro sat heavily on the rocky path, staring numbly at the spot where his treasure had vanished. All his careful guarding and constant worrying had meant absolutely nothing. In a single chaotic moment, what he had held most dear was gone forever. He expected to feel utterly devastated and crushed by grief. But instead, something unexpected and miraculous happened. A powerful wave of relief washed completely over him. The constant worry was gone. The need to protect and check and hide had vanished instantly along with the stone. For the very first time in weeks, his mind felt clear, open, and spacious. He realized with startling clarity that in trying so hard to hold on to the stone, he had lost something far more valuable: his peace of mind. As Jiro walked back up the mountain path with his empty buckets, he felt lighter and freer than he had in months. The stone had indeed been beautiful, but the anxiety it brought had made his life smaller and more fearful. Now, with empty pockets and an open heart, he could see the real, quiet magic that had always been there. The morning mist dancing gracefully between the peaks. The soothing sound of his own footsteps on the ancient stone. The simple, nourishing rhythm of breathing the mountain air. That evening, Jiro went to his teacher and told him the entire story. The master listened quietly, nodding with deep understanding. "The stone taught you something precious," the teacher said. "But the lesson was not in keeping it. The essential lesson was in losing it. You discovered that your happiness was never truly located in the stone itself. It was always in your ability to appreciate beauty when you encountered it. That inherent ability cannot fall off a cliff. It goes wherever you go." The teacher smiled gently. "We mistakenly think we need to possess the things we love. But possession instantly turns love into fear. When you truly love something, you can let it be free. And in that freedom, both you and what you love finally find peace." This simple, moving story reveals one of the most transformative teachings in all of Buddhist wisdom. We suffer not because we love things, but because we fiercely try to own them. The moment we grasp tightly to anything, whether it's an object, a person, an experience, or even a strongly held idea, we instantly plant the seeds of our own anxiety. Jiro's experience shows us something profound about the true nature of attachment. The stone itself was not the problem. Beauty is absolutely meant to be appreciated. Joy is meant to be felt. But when appreciation spirals into possession, when joy becomes clinging, we inevitably lose the very essence we were trying so desperately to keep. The stone brought Jiro happiness when he first found it. But that happiness completely disappeared the moment he decided he had to keep it forever. This teaching transforms how we relate to everything we cherish. Our relationships become more loving and healthier when we stop trying to control them. Our experiences become richer and more vivid when we stop demanding they last forever. Our possessions bring far more joy when we hold them lightly, appreciating them fully while we have them and releasing them gracefully when the time naturally comes. The deepest peace comes not from successfully getting what we want and keeping it forever, but from learning to deeply want what we already have and learning to let it go when it is time. This practice is not about becoming emotionally cold or indifferent. It is about loving so completely that we want what is best for whatever we love, even if that means allowing it to follow its own independent path. Breathe gently now and feel how this understanding settles warmly in your body. Notice how even thinking about letting go creates a deep sense of spaciousness, like setting down an impossibly heavy pack you've been carrying relentlessly for miles. Let us explore this wisdom further through another story, one that shows how letting go can transform not just our relationship with things, but our relationship with ourselves. Master Aishin was known throughout the region as the most skilled and celebrated calligrapher in generations. People would travel for many days just to commission a single piece of his work, and his scrolls were treasured by esteemed collectors and temples alike. His brush strokes seemed to flow directly from some divine, effortless source, creating characters of extraordinary beauty, vitality, and power. Aishin took immense personal pride in his precise art. He would spend hours meticulously preparing his ink to the perfect, velvety consistency, carefully selecting brushes with the ideal flexibility, and patiently waiting for precisely the right mental and spiritual state before beginning any important piece. His studio was arranged with meticulous care. Every tool, every weight, every item was in its proper, exact place. One spring morning, a wealthy merchant commissioned Aishin to create a special scroll for his daughter's upcoming wedding. It was to be the most important, high-profile piece Aishin had ever attempted, deemed worthy of the substantial payment offered. The merchant requested specific characters, meaning eternal happiness, rendered in Aishin's most elaborate and flawless style. Aishin prepared for days with extreme intensity. He fasted to purify his mind, meditated deeply to calm his spirit, and practiced the requested characters repeatedly, hundreds of times on ordinary paper. When he finally deemed himself ready, he carefully unfurled his finest silk scroll, prepared his most precious, aged ink, and selected his most beloved and responsive brush. As he commenced the first character, an immediate sense of perfection washed over him. His hand moved with an effortless, fluid grace. The rich ink flowed onto the silk like liquid night, and the character emerged with stunning beauty and vitality. Aishin's heart swelled with triumphant satisfaction. This, he knew, would be his true masterpiece, the singular piece that would solidify his reputation for generations to come. But just as he moved his brush toward the second character, disaster struck with cruel swiftness. A sudden, unexpected gust of wind swept through the open window, knocking over his ceramic water bowl. The cold water splashed violently across the delicate silk, creating a large, dark, irreparable stain that spread directly through the very center of his perfect first character. Aishin stared at the ruined scroll in utter horror. Weeks of painstaking preparation had been annihilated in a single careless instant. The silk was rare and prohibitively expensive. The commission was vital to his career. But the deepest blow was the realization that the exquisite, perfect character he had just created was now completely and irrevocably destroyed. His immediate impulse was to erupt in a fury of frustration, to rage at the indifferent wind, at his own carelessness for leaving the window ajar, and at the accident's impossibly cruel timing. He briefly considered attempting to salvage the work, but the staining on the silk was profound and irreversible. Starting anew was not an option. He possessed no more silk of this extraordinary quality, and the anxious merchant was expecting the completed piece within days. As Aishin sat staring blankly at the ruined scroll, feeling his long-held dreams of the flawless masterpiece crumbling into dust, something profound shifted within his perspective. He focused his gaze more intently on the water stain. He noticed that it had formed an organic, flowing shape, a texture and contour that, surprisingly, seemed to complement the surviving partial character rather than utterly destroy it. The stain possessed its own unintentional, raw beauty, suggesting the movement of a cloud formation or the rugged silhouette of a distant mountain range. Instead of discarding the scroll entirely, Aishin slowly picked up his brush again. He made a conscious choice to begin working with the accident rather than relentlessly fighting against it. He seamlessly incorporated the massive water stain into his developing design, using its contours as the unexpected foundation for an entirely different kind of composition. Where his original intent had been meticulous, formal perfection, he now began creating something startlingly wild, dynamic, and spontaneous. The characters he subsequently painted around and through the damp, organic shape possessed a freedom and raw, untamed energy unlike anything he had ever produced in his long career. Instead of rigidly trying to control every single brush stroke, he allowed his hand to respond naturally to the unforeseen textures and patterns that were already present on the silk. The accident had ceased to be an enemy of the process. It had become an active, invaluable partner in creation. When Aishin finally stepped back, he realized he had created something profoundly more moving and beautiful than his meticulously detailed original plan. The finished piece vibrated with a life and movement that his previous, carefully controlled work had consistently lacked. The water stain, which had initially felt like a complete disaster, had paradoxically freed him from the shackles of his own relentless perfectionism, allowing his true, liberated artistic spirit to finally emerge. The merchant was visibly stunned and deeply moved when he was presented with the finished work. "Master Aishin," he exclaimed, "I have been privileged to see many examples of your exquisite art, but this is beyond anything you have ever created before. How did you achieve such effortless, spontaneous beauty?" Aishin smiled gently, recalling his initial moment of crushing horror at the accident. "I stopped trying to create perfection," he explained, "and started allowing perfection to create itself through the moment. The stain taught me a profound truth. My greatest adversary was not imperfection itself, but my paralyzing fear of it. Once I released my desperate need to control every single detail, my art finally became truly and authentically alive." From that pivotal day forward, Aishin's approach to his work changed completely and fundamentally. He continued to practice diligently and prepare carefully, but he no longer attempted to force the material into a predetermined, rigid outcome. He learned, instead, to dance gracefully with accidents, to welcome the completely unexpected, and to recognize imperfection not as a failure, but as a doorway to deeper, more authentic creativity. This profound story illustrates how the act of letting go radically transforms not only our relationship with external circumstances, but, critically, our relationship with ourselves and the investment we place in our own efforts. Aishin discovered that his powerful attachment to the concept of perfection was, in fact, the very thing preventing him from creating truly masterful art. His deep-seated fear of making a mistake had barred him from the spontaneous beauty that naturally emerges when we learn to trust the unpredictable flow of life. This transformative teaching reaches into every sphere and corner of our daily lives. How often do we unknowingly miss genuine opportunities for joy because we are rigidly focused on anticipating and avoiding potential problems? How many valuable relationships become unnecessarily strained because we attempt too forcefully to control precisely how they should unfold? How much precious creative energy do we squander struggling to force specific outcomes instead of responding skillfully, mindfully, and gracefully to what actually manifests in reality? The core of the Buddhist path instructs us that our deepest suffering arises from fighting against reality instead of learning to flow naturally with it. When Aishin ceased battling the presence of the water stain and began actively working with its contours, he unlocked possibilities he could never have conceived within his rigid framework. When we finally stop demanding that life slavishly match our preconceived expectations and instead begin engaging creatively with the reality that actually shows up, we discover a profound freedom and a potent aliveness that no level of strict control could ever hope to provide. This, fundamentally, is why letting go is so absolutely central to the cultivation of deep, abiding peace. It does not mean resigning oneself or becoming passively indifferent to life's affairs. Rather, it means recognizing that our tight, fearful grip on how things should be often completely prevents us from seeing and appreciating how inherently beautiful and complex they already are. It requires trusting that the process of life understands something about its own natural unfolding that our worried, analyzing minds simply cannot fully grasp. The genuine peace derived from this understanding is profound because it is not contingent upon circumstances adhering to a certain predictable outcome. Whether the cherished stone falls irrevocably off the cliff or remains safely in our pocket, whether the water spills dramatically on our scroll or not, we can always find our way to sustainable contentment by working mindfully and skillfully with whatever reality presents itself. As you rest now in the quiet of this sanctuary of learning, gently feel into the wisdom of this teaching about letting go. Take a moment to notice any specific places in your life where you might be gripping too tightly, where your underlying fear of loss or the demand for imperfection-free outcomes might be generating unnecessary, harmful tension. What would the physical and mental sensation be if you allowed yourself to soften that grip, even just a fraction? This posture is not about becoming reckless or carelessly indifferent. Aishin still valued his calligraphy deeply, just as Jiro could still appreciate beauty without ownership. But when we learn to love something without needing to possess it completely, when we care deeply without needing to strictly control its destiny, we discover a way of being that manages to be both profoundly engaged and simultaneously peaceful. Allow yourself to rest completely in this powerful possibility. The deepest and most essential teachings of Buddhism point toward this exact freedom, this radical ability to hold the preciousness of life lightly while simultaneously embracing it fully. In this delicate balance between earnest caring and intentional releasing, between diligent effort and profound surrender, we discover a peace that passes all conventional understanding. This is the peace that grants the body and mind permission to rest completely, secured in the knowledge that whatever arrives in the future, we possess the inner wisdom and capacity to meet it with an open, unwavering heart. In a quiet village situated at the edge of a vast, ancient forest lived a baker named Kenji, renowned throughout the community for his exceptionally kind heart and generous spirit. Every morning, long before the sun rose, he would methodically light his stone ovens and begin the day's preparation of fresh bread. The comforting, warm smell of baking yeast and flour would inevitably drift through the village streets, gently rousing the inhabitants and filling their hearts with a simple, daily anticipation. Kenji maintained a simple, selfless practice. He always baked a few extra loaves each day and placed them on a worn wooden shelf just outside his shop in trance, accompanied by a small, hand-painted sign that simply read, "For those who need them, travelers, poor families, and indeed anyone who was suffering from hunger could take what they required without the indignity of having to ask, explain, or justify their circumstances." During one particularly harsh winter, when food supplies dwindled and many villagers struggled just to survive, a band of desperate men resorted to stealing from the shops and homes. They would move silently in the deepest part of the night, taking whatever sustenance or valuables they could find. The village quickly became paralyzed by fear, leading many residents to double-lock their doors and hide away all their valuables. Kenji's bakery, however, was targeted and robbed 3 separate times in just 2 weeks. On each occasion, the thieves took not only the charitable bread from the shelf, but also vital cash from his till and precious flour from his storage bins. After the 3rd robbery, they also wantonly broke several of his specialized baking tools and violently overturned his carefully organized workspace, causing significant damage. The other villagers were righteously outraged on Kenji's behalf. "You must stop leaving bread outside," they vehemently told him. "You are merely encouraging them. Put up sturdy bars on your windows. Get a fierce guard dog. You must show these criminals that you absolutely will not be an easy target anymore." But Kenji, maintaining his calm resolve, continued his simple practice. Each morning, he would patiently clean up the resulting damage, repair what tools he could salvage, and bake his bread precisely as he always had. He never failed to leave the extra loaves on the shelf outside, although now they disappeared even more swiftly than before. One intensely cold night, Kenji was working exceptionally late, preparing the necessary dough for the next day's baking. He distinctly heard a sound at his front door and noticed unsettling shadows moving just outside. Instead of instinctively hiding or raising an alarm, he performed an act that astonished even his own practical mind. He simply opened the door. 3 gaunt men stood frozen on the stoop, their faces skeletal with hunger, their clothes ragged and torn from harsh living in the winter forest. They had clearly arrived with the intention of stealing again, but they stopped dead when they found Kenji standing there, looking at them directly and without fear. "You must be very hungry," Kenji said softly, his voice full of warmth, "to be out on a night so bitterly cold." The men were entirely unable to respond. They had expected the shop to be empty, allowing them to quickly take what they needed and vanish back into the shroud of darkness. They had absolutely not anticipated being met with such immediate, unexpected kindness. "I have a large pot of fresh soup simmering on the stove," Kenji continued gently, "and there is warm, fragrant bread that just came out of the oven. Would you care to come in and share a meal?" The oldest of the 3 men, who appeared to be their hesitant leader, looked deeply suspicious. "Why would you help us?" he demanded. "Don't you understand who we are? We are the ones who have repeatedly been taking from you." Kenji nodded calmly, acknowledging the truth. "I know," he replied, "and I can see that you have only ever taken what you needed to survive. A man does not resort to stealing bread because he is inherently evil. He steals bread because he is suffering from desperate hunger." He stepped aside, gracefully gesturing for them to enter the warm bakery. "The winter is terribly hard for everyone," he concluded, "but it does not have to turn us into enemies." Slowly and with great caution, the 3 men shuffled into the comforting warmth of the bakery. Kenji silently served them steaming bowl after steaming bowl of hot, hearty soup, along with all the fresh bread their starved bodies could hold. As the warmth radiated through them and their empty stomachs filled, they began to speak. They revealed that they had all lost their means of income when the local mine suddenly closed down. With no other work available in the region and their meager savings exhausted, they had been driven to a miserable existence in the forest. They had attempted to beg, but the fearful villagers had aggressively chased them away. "Stealing simply seemed like our last, only option for sheer survival," they admitted. "We never, ever wanted to hurt anyone," the youngest man said, his eyes glistening with fresh tears. "We just couldn't bear to starve." Kenji listened patiently to their entire difficult story with deep, unwavering attention. When they were finished eating, Kenji made an offer that left them utterly astonished. "I could sincerely use help with the very early morning baking," he stated. "The work is demanding and the hours are long, but there will always be sufficient food, and I can offer you a warm, secure place to sleep in the small room above the shop. If you are willing to work honestly, you are most welcome to stay." The three men exchanged wide-eyed, disbelieving glances. They had entered this place as thieves intent on robbing this man, and now he was extending the opportunity for jobs and shelter. The oldest man slowly shook his head, struggling to comprehend. "Why on earth would you trust us?" he asked. "We have robbed you repeatedly." Kenji smiled gently, his belief unshaken. "Because I hold the conviction that people inevitably do better when they are genuinely given the chance to do better," he explained. "You stole because you were trapped in desperation. But desperation is merely a transient situation you found yourselves in. It is not your fundamental nature." The men accepted the offer and stayed, driven by a deep gratitude for the opportunity to earn an honest living. They worked harder and more diligently than any employees Kenji had ever managed. Within just a few months, the bakery thrived and became more prosperous than ever before. The village grew safer, and the formerly desperate thieves transformed into productive and highly respected members of the community. Years afterward, when people inquired why Kenji had chosen such radical kindness over immediate punishment, he would invariably say, "Fear is a force that only creates more fear. Anger is a force that only generates more anger. But genuine compassion possesses the radical power to completely transform even the most hopeless and difficult situations." When we choose to respond to suffering with sincere understanding instead of harsh judgment, we inherently give everyone involved, ourselves included, the chance to become better than they previously were. This deceptively simple story reveals a profoundly important truth about the nature of compassion within Buddhist teaching. True compassion is far more than simply feeling sorry for others or managing to be nice when circumstances are easy. It is the wisdom to clearly perceive that beneath every destructive or harmful action lies some form of deep suffering, and the courage required to respond to that suffering with understanding and healing, rather than immediate condemnation or punishment. Kenji possessed an insight that the other fearful villagers completely missed. The thieves were not inherently evil people who took joy in causing disruption. They were merely human beings trapped by desperate, grinding circumstances, acting out of acute pain and fundamental need rather than malicious intent. By choosing to respond to their behavior with radical compassion instead of retaliatory anger, Kenji consciously created the precise conditions necessary for genuine, lasting transformation. This teaching vividly demonstrates that compassion is absolutely not a sign of weakness or naive credulity. It is, in fact, a powerful, active force capable of fundamentally changing situations that otherwise appear utterly hopeless. When we instinctively meet aggression with reflexive counter-aggression, we only succeed in escalating the conflict infinitely. But when we are capable of seeing clearly through a person's harmful external behavior to the inner pain that is actually driving it, we immediately open the crucial door to healing for everyone involved. The profound peace that Buddhist teachings offer stems partially from this core understanding. When we train ourselves to respond to difficulty with genuine compassion, we cease adding the weight of our own anger and fear to the world's already heavy burden of suffering. Instead, we transition into becoming active agents of healing and transformation. This approach does not imply passively accepting harmful behavior or recklessly putting ourselves into unnecessary danger. It means cultivating the deeper understanding that lasting, sustainable solutions emerge from addressing the fundamental root causes of problems, rather than merely reacting superficially to their symptoms. Take a gentle, conscious breath now, and allow yourself to feel how deeply this insightful understanding settles into your heart space. Notice how the simple act of contemplating responding with compassion immediately creates a sense of profound spaciousness and calm, as if a tight, constricted knot in your chest has instantly begun to loosen its hold. Let us now explore this essential wisdom further through another powerful story, one that reveals how compassion intentionally directed toward ourselves can be just as radically transformative as the compassion we actively offer to others. There was once an earnest student named Mickey who traveled far to study at a remote mountain temple, famous for its rigorous and uncompromising meditation practice. She had heard tales of the resident monks, who could sit in perfect, unbroken stillness for hours, their minds clear and reflective as mountain lakes, their hearts imbued with boundless, unconditional peace. Mickey wanted desperately to achieve the same rarefied level of spiritual attainment. She immediately threw herself into the practice with fierce, uncompromising determination. She would rise at 3 o'clock in the morning to begin meditating before any of the other students were awake. She would sit through communal meals in austere silence, choosing to contemplate dense spiritual teachings instead of eating. She constantly pushed herself to meditate for periods far longer than anyone else, often sitting until her legs were completely numb and her back throbbed terribly with pain. Yet, instead of finding the clarity and deep peace she relentlessly sought, Mickey found her mind becoming increasingly agitated, critical, and aggressive. During her meditation sessions, rather than observing her thoughts with gentle, non-judgmental awareness, she would savagely attack each wandering thought with harsh inner criticism. "Focus!" she would furiously command herself. "Stop being so undisciplined. Look, other students can do this effortlessly. What exactly is wrong with you?" When her concentration felt scattered, she would punish herself by deliberately skipping meals or unilaterally adding extra hours of grueling sitting. If she felt even a moment of drowsiness during practice, she would mercilessly scold herself for being lazy and hopelessly weak. Her entire inner dialogue had devolved into a constant, crushing stream of judgment, self-loathing, and crushing disappointment. After months of this relentless, harsh self-treatment, Mickey found herself more profoundly miserable and conflicted than she had been upon arrival. Her body was thin and weakened from self-imposed fasting. Her mind was utterly exhausted from the constant, vicious cycle of self-criticism, and her heart felt crushingly heavy with shame regarding her perceived spiritual failures. One morning, following an exceptionally difficult meditation session during which she had severely berated herself for every momentary lapse in focus, Mickey sought refuge in the temple's small garden to weep in private. She sank beneath the protective boughs of a cherry tree, convinced she was a complete and irredeemable failure as a student of the spiritual path. Master Yuki, the temple's wise, elderly teacher, happened to be walking a quiet path through the garden. Noticing Mickey's profound distress, she approached and sat down quietly beside her on the cool stone bench. "Tell me about your practice," Master Yuki invited gently. Through choking sobs and tears, Mickey poured out the entirety of her frustration. She detailed her impossibly rigorous schedule, her unrelenting self-criticism, and her deep disappointment with her total lack of spiritual progress. "I try so unbearably hard," she wept, "but I am simply not good enough. I will never be able to meditate successfully like the other students. Maybe I should just abandon the path entirely." Master Yuki listened to this agonizing confession in profound, compassionate silence. When Mickey finally fell silent, the teacher gently pointed toward a small, brown bird that had landed nearby, close to their feet. The bird was busily pecking at the earth, diligently searching for scattered seeds and tiny insects. "Watch this little bird closely," Master Yuki instructed. "Observe how effortlessly and naturally it moves. It does not pause to criticize itself for failing to locate food quickly enough. It does not pause to anxiously compare its progress or appearance to other birds. It simply performs the function of a bird moment by moment, with complete, unshakable acceptance of its own intrinsic nature. Mickey watched the small creature for several long minutes, instantly struck by its effortless, unforced presence and its sheer natural grace. Now, Master Yuki continued, her voice gentle but firm, imagine if this tiny bird spent all its precious time internally telling itself it was a terrible bird, declaring that it should fly higher or sing more exquisitely. What would become of its natural, innate ability to diligently find food and secure shelter? What would happen to its simple, unadulterated joy in the act of simply being a bird? Mickey understood the metaphor immediately. It would be far too occupied criticizing itself, she realized, to effectively do what it naturally knows how to do. Master Yuki nodded gravely. You arrived here seeking to learn both profound peace and unconditional compassion, my student. Yet the absolute first place to apply these vital qualities is internally, with yourself. How can you genuinely offer kindness and understanding to others if you relentlessly show nothing but punitive harshness to your own heart? How can you possibly expect to find peace in meditation if you are simultaneously waging a constant, destructive war against your own mind? The teacher's voice was filled with a calming, gentle warmth. The authentic path to awakening is fundamentally not about the rigid pursuit of perfection, she affirmed. It is, instead, about the courageous act of becoming kind. First and foremost to yourself, and then, naturally, extending that kindness to all other beings. Your mind, Mickey, will inevitably wander during meditation. That is precisely what human minds are inherently designed to do. The actual practice is not to forcefully stop this wandering, but rather to notice it arise with the very same gentle, unconditional affection you would naturally show a beloved young child who momentarily gets distracted while learning the difficult task of walking. From that day forward, Mickey radically transformed her entire approach to her spiritual practice. Instead of issuing harsh commands to her mind to focus instantly, she would gently and patiently invite it back to the awareness of her breath. Instead of criticizing her own wandering thoughts, she would simply acknowledge them with soft, labeling phrases like thinking or planning, and then return to her core meditation practice steeped in kindness. When her body signaled fatigue, instead of pushing through with sheer, stubborn determination, she would pause to adjust her posture or take a brief, restorative break, treating her physical needs with sincere respect. When difficult emotions arose during sitting, instead of judging them harshly as spiritual obstacles, she would breathe with them compassionately, just as she might comfort a dear friend experiencing deep distress. The transformation in Mickey's practice was nothing short of remarkable. Within a matter of weeks, her meditation naturally deepened and became profoundly more peaceful. Her mind, finally free from the burden of constant self-attack, gradually began to settle into the deep stillness she had sought for months. Even more importantly, the relentless, harsh inner critic that had tormented her for so long slowly softened, transforming into an internal voice of gentle encouragement and unwavering support. Years later, Mickey herself became widely known for her uniquely compassionate teaching style and her great skill in helping struggling students find their own path to genuine peace. When inevitably asked about the core of her approach, she would always reply, I learned that the kindness and acceptance we consistently show ourselves becomes the true, necessary foundation for all the kindness we can genuinely offer the world. We fundamentally cannot give away what we do not already possess, and we can never hope to find lasting peace through war, especially when that war is relentlessly waged against our own being. This inspiring story illuminates one of the most essential and often overlooked teachings on compassion within Buddhism. Before we can sincerely and effectively help others, or before we can realize any lasting inner peace, we must first learn to treat ourselves with the exact same gentleness, patience, and profound understanding that we would unhesitatingly offer to someone we love deeply. The majority of us carry an intense inner critic that is infinitely harsher and more punitive than we would ever dare to be toward a beloved friend. This relentless internal violence actively prevents us from accessing our natural, inherent wisdom and peace. Mickey's hard-won journey demonstrates that self-compassion is not a form of self-indulgence or an excuse for spiritual laziness. It is, rather, the powerful recognition that human beings learn, change, and grow far more effectively in an atmosphere defined by kindness and acceptance than in one choked by constant, harsh judgment. When we finally cease waging war against the presence of our own imperfections, our minds effortlessly and naturally settle into the innate peace that has always rested there, beneath the surface conflict. This realization fundamentally transforms our entire approach to spiritual practice and personal growth. Instead of exhaustively attempting to force ourselves toward enlightenment through brutal, harsh discipline, we consciously create the ideal conditions for awakening through the consistent application of gentle persistence and loving patience. Much like a tender garden that thrives better with steady, mindful care than with violent, disruptive digging, our hearts and minds flourish optimally when they are tended with profound self-compassion. The Buddhist path continually teaches us that unnecessary suffering overwhelmingly arises from our deep-seated resistance to our own internal experience. When Mickey fought desperately against her own wandering mind, she generated far more suffering than the fleeting thoughts themselves ever caused. When she finally learned to accept her natural mental patterns with unconditional kindness, the very same mind that had seemed chaotic and uncontrollable began to naturally reveal its inherent clarity. This profound understanding delivers enormous relief because it confirms that we absolutely do not need to be flawless or perfect to be worthy of genuine love and inner peace. We are not required to eliminate all our perceived shortcomings before we can begin the meaningful work of helping others. We are simply asked to learn how to meet our inherent imperfections with the exact same compassionate understanding that we would naturally offer to any other suffering being. As you rest immersed in this teaching now, gently notice how your physical body responds to the radical idea of treating yourself with unwavering, complete kindness. Feel how even the possibility of concluding the inner war immediately generates a tangible sense of softening and relief. This posture is not equivalent to laziness or a cynical lowering of personal standards. This is the clear recognition that love is an exponentially more powerful, lasting force for fundamental transformation than fear could ever be. The compassion that takes root and begins within ourselves naturally and effortlessly extends outward to embrace all beings. When we finally cease judging our own struggles so harshly, we simultaneously become far more patient with the struggles of others. When we learn to genuinely forgive our own inevitable mistakes, we develop the deep capacity to forgive those who have inflicted hurt upon us. When we internalize that our own suffering demands understanding rather than punishment, we begin to see clearly that the same truth applies universally to everyone. The deep, unshakable peace that these profound teachings offer stems entirely from this pivotal shift in how we choose to meet life's inevitable difficulties. Instead of desperately fighting against the appearance of problems or judging ourselves severely for possessing them, we learn, instead, to embrace whatever arises with the tender, nurturing care of a mother holding her beloved child. In this unconditional embrace, transformation happens organically and naturally, not through brute force or tyrannical control, but purely through the power of love. Allow yourself to rest completely in this liberating possibility now. Imagine and feel what it might be like to navigate tomorrow with the very same consistent kindness toward yourself that Master Yuki so wisely demonstrated toward Mickey. Notice deeply how this profound inner gentleness immediately creates the necessary space for genuine wisdom and tranquil peace to emerge effortlessly. This is the true, invaluable gift that Buddhist teachings offer, not merely a collection of techniques aimed at incremental self-improvement, but an entirely different, revolutionary way of relating to ourselves and our experience. Experience. A path that inevitably guides us toward the profound sense of deep rest achieved when the heart, at last, finds the safety required to settle into peace. We turn now to the story of a young tea merchant named Taro, who journeyed tirelessly from village to village, offering the finest, most sought-after teas sourced from distant mountain ranges. His modest cart was expertly packed with carefully wrapped packages of fragrant green tea, robust black tea, and rare flowering teas that, when steeped in hot water, gracefully unfurled like delicate blossoms. Taro certainly took immense pride in his refined knowledge of tea, its origins, processing, and subtle nuances, and his practiced skill in matching every customer with a perfect blend tailored to their specific preference. Despite this mastery, Taro harbored a significant issue. His consciousness was chronically elsewhere. When he walked through one village, his thoughts were already racing ahead to the next destination he needed to reach. While discussing the subtleties of tea with customers, his internal monologue was consumed by calculating potential profits or anxiously anticipating the weather conditions for tomorrow's journey. Even while attempting to enjoy his evening meal, he was invariably occupied, plotting the next day's demanding route or mentally replaying the day's earlier conversations. This relentless, self-generated mental activity left Taro feeling chronically exhausted and thoroughly scattered. He frequently arrived in a new village only to realize that the entire preceding journey was a blank. He couldn't recall a single detail of the path he had just traveled. Conversations would conclude, and he would instantly forget the customer's name or the specific tea they had purchased. His existence, though full of movement and work, felt like an indistinct blur, devoid of any genuine satisfaction or enduring peace. One evening, Taro reached a remote mountain village precisely as the sun began its descent. He felt utterly depleted from a taxing day of travel and was desperate to find comfortable lodging. As he slowly pulled his heavy cart through the quiet, darkening streets, his eye caught a small, welcoming tea house from whose windows spilled a soft, warm glow. Peering inside, he saw an elderly woman seated alone at a low table, meticulously and slowly preparing tea with precise, deliberate movements. There was an arresting quality to her presence. She appeared utterly absorbed in her task, radiating a sense that nothing else in the world existed beyond the gentle, unfolding ritual of the tea ceremony. Taro knocked gently and requested permission to take shelter there for the night. The woman, whose name was Sachiko, welcomed him warmly and invited him to take a seat while she completed the preparation of the tea. "I am a tea merchant," Taro announced, settling his weary body onto a cushion. "I carry the most exquisite teas from all across the region. Perhaps you would be interested in sampling some of my very finest varieties?" Sachiko offered a gentle smile but maintained her slow, meditative rhythm. "Thank you for your generous offer," she replied calmly. "But first, would you kindly join me in drinking this tea I have already prepared? It is merely simple green tea, nothing elaborate." Taro agreed, though he was inwardly itching to present his superior premium selections. Sachiko poured the fresh tea into small, unassuming clay cups and carefully placed one before him. She then lifted her own cup and took a deliberate, deeply appreciative sip. Taro lifted his cup and quickly gulped the tea, his mind already formulating technical comments on the quality and potential ways to improve the blend. But before he could utter a word, Sachiko inquired quietly, "What did you taste?" For the very first time, he registered the delicate warmth spreading across his tongue. He noticed the subtle astringency, a quality that left his mouth feeling faintly dry. A fleeting sweetness surfaced only after the initial, slight bitterness subsided. There was an underlying earthy character to the flavor that suddenly brought to mind the fresh scent of morning mist lingering over mountain forests. "Now, what did you taste?" Sachiko asked again. "I actually tasted the tea," Taro admitted, genuinely surprised by the simplicity of his own realization. "Not my judgments or thoughts about the tea, but the tea itself." Sachiko nodded in acknowledgement. "Most people," she observed, "spend their entire lives drinking tea without ever truly tasting it. They are so preoccupied with thinking about the tea, comparing it to past brews, judging its merits, deciding whether or not they enjoy it, that they completely bypass the direct, simple experience of drinking." She poured him a fresh cup. "Try again," she encouraged. "This time, also notice the feeling of holding the warm cup in your hands. Notice the physical sensation of swallowing. Pay close attention to the subtle dance of the steam rising from the liquid surface." Taro spent the next hour drinking tea with a sustained level of focused attention he had never previously known. Every single sip transformed into a miniature meditation. He observed how his breathing spontaneously deepened and slowed the moment he focused completely on the present experience. His typically racing thoughts subsided, replaced by a quiet, immediate appreciation for the simple reality of what was unfolding. "This is precisely how I learned to find peace," Sachiko told him as the evening deepened. "Not by attempting to change my external circumstances, but by showing up fully and attentively for whatever was already right here. I have been preparing tea in this exact, simple manner for 30 years, and yet I discover something novel every single time, simply because I am completely present for the experience." That night, Taro slept with a profound depth and stillness he had not known in months. The following morning, as he prepared to resume his journey, he realized that his entire perception of the world had shifted. While loading his cart, he carefully registered the specific weight and texture of each individual tea package. As he walked through the quiet village, he heard the distinct song of birds he had somehow never noticed before. The morning air felt intensely fresh and alive against his skin. From that day onward, Taro's entire approach to his vocation underwent a fundamental transformation. Instead of hurrying through his days while mentally checked out, he consciously began to incorporate the practice Sachiko had demonstrated. When engaging with customers, he listened fully and attentively to their needs and comments, rather than merely using the time to construct his subsequent sales pitch. When traveling from village to village, he observed the constantly changing landscape, the subtle sensation of his feet meeting the path, and the steady rhythm of his own breath. This simple, profound shift in attention revolutionized not only Taro's personal experience of his work, but also his success as a merchant. Customers started actively seeking him out because they sensed they were truly heard and understood when conversing with him. His genuine, focused presence inspired deep trust, and his careful attention allowed him to precisely match each person with the ideal tea variety for their specific needs. Years later, when people inquired about the secret to his settled, peaceful contentment, Taro would simply reply, "I learned that happiness is not something you must search for by looking elsewhere. It is a quality you discover by being completely and fully present right where you already stand." This evocative story illustrates one of Buddhism's most practical and deeply transformative teachings, the practice of mindfulness, or cultivating complete, unwavering attention to the present moment. The truth is that most of us live our lives much like Taro did before his fateful encounter with Sachiko. Our physical bodies may reside in one location, but our minds are perpetually wandering elsewhere. We eat our meals without truly tasting the food, we walk without genuinely seeing our surroundings, and we engage in conversation without fully listening. This chronic state of divided attention is a primary source of human suffering because it effectively blocks us from ever feeling genuinely satisfied or settled. When we are always mentally anticipating the next event or goal, we inevitably overlook the profound richness and sensory input available in the immediate now. When our focus is continuously scattered between the past and the future, we forfeit the ability to rest peacefully in the simple reality of the present moment. The Buddhist conceptualization of mindfulness is not about striving to empty the mind completely or attempting to achieve some lofty, special state of consciousness. Rather, it is the straightforward discipline of learning to be entirely present for whatever is currently happening, whether that is the act of drinking tea, engaging in a conversation, or simply taking a breath. This commitment to complete attention naturally cultivates a deep sense of peace because it halts the inherent mental restlessness and incessant searching that keeps us feeling anxious and fundamentally unsettled. Taro's breakthrough demonstrated that an activity he had performed thousands of times, drinking tea, could be transformed into a source of profound satisfaction merely by focusing his full attention upon it. This teaches us a crucial point. We do not need to radically alter our life circumstances in order to find peace. We only need to transform the quality of attention we bring to those circumstances. The diligent practice of mindfulness converts mundane, ordinary moments into precious opportunities for deep rest and genuine renewal. When we eat with focused attention, each meal becomes profoundly nourishing for both the body and the spirit. When we listen with absolute presence, our relationships deepen and become infinitely more meaningful. When mindful attention is applied to any activity, the activity itself transforms into a natural form of meditation that effortlessly settles the mind. Take a gentle breath now, and simply feel the experience of being completely present for the straightforward, simple act of breathing. Notice how naturally your mind quiets when you focus exclusively on what is occurring in this very moment. This immediate, accessible quiet is the peace that Buddhist teachings promise, not as some distant, elusive goal or difficult achievement, but as the natural and inevitable result of paying careful attention to life as it gracefully unfolds, moment by moment. Let us further explore this wisdom through another narrative, one that illustrates how the power of mindfulness can fundamentally transform even our most painful and challenging experiences. Master Josen was renowned throughout the region for his remarkable ability to remain calm and profoundly centered, regardless of the turmoil or events occurring around him. Students often traveled long distances from remote temples to study under him, hoping desperately to uncover the secret to his seemingly unshakable peace. However, Josen's most devoted student, a young monk named Kaku, harbored persistent doubts about his teacher's celebrated reputation. Kaku had resided at the temple for 2 years, and while he acknowledged Master Josen as both wise and kind, he had never witnessed him confront any truly serious difficulty. The temple grounds were peaceful, the community lived in harmony, and their daily routine was predictable and serenely scheduled. Kaku often questioned whether his teacher's celebrated calmness was simply a byproduct of living in such perfectly ideal, sheltered conditions. Anyone can be peaceful in a place like this, Kaku once confided to a friend. But what would happen if Master Josen were to face genuine, crushing problems? Would he retain his composure if his world was truly turned upside down? One crisp autumn morning, Kaku's critical question was answered in the most brutal and unexpected fashion. A messenger arrived at the temple gates bearing terrible news. Bandits had attacked Master Josen's home village during the night. His elderly mother and younger brother, who still resided there, had been violently killed, and the family home where Josen had been raised was burned utterly to the ground. Kaku watched his teacher's face intently as he absorbed the devastating report. For a single, fleeting moment, Josen's eyes welled up with unshed tears, and his entire body seemed to visibly slump under the unbearable weight of grief. But then, something truly remarkable occurred. Instead of collapsing in despair or raging against the senseless tragedy, Josen simply sank onto a nearby stone and deliberately began to breathe, slowly and profoundly deeply. "Master," the messenger pressed urgently, "shouldn't you leave at once? There may be complex arrangements to make, ceremonies to plan." Josen nodded gently. Yes, I will go, he affirmed. But first, I require a few moments to be fully present with this news and to absorb the profound meaning of what has transpired. Kaku watched, absolutely amazed. His teacher was confronting the worst possible personal tragedy, yet he was neither running about frantically nor succumbing to drowning despair. Instead, he sat quietly, paying careful, unwavering attention to the raw sensations of his own grief and shock. After several minutes of centered, silent breathing, Josen stood up calmly. Kaku, he said, please come with me. We will travel to my village together. During the long, arduous journey, Kaku fully expected his teacher to be lost in paralyzing sorrow or entirely distracted by logistical planning. Instead, he found Josen to be more present and attentive than he had ever seen him. When they paused to rest, Josen noticed the brilliant, changing colors of the autumn leaves. When they encountered fellow travelers, he listened to their shared stories with full concentration. When they ate their simple meals, he consumed the food with a visible, obvious appreciation. Master, Kaku finally asked, unable to contain his profound confusion any longer. How is it possible that you can notice such small, ordinary things when something so truly terrible has occurred? Shouldn't you be too deeply upset to pay attention to anything else? Josen halted their steps and looked at his student with eyes that simultaneously held profound sadness and unshakable peace. Kaku, he replied gently, this is exactly when mindful attention matters the most. When we are overwhelmed by tragedy, our deepest instinct is to mentally escape the present moment. We become entirely lost in regretful thoughts about what we should have done differently, or we anxiously imagine all the irreversible ways the future will be ruined by this terrible loss. He gestured toward the forest path they were traversing. But escaping into mental narratives about the past or the future serves no one. My mother and brother are gone. No amount of self-inflicted mental anguish can ever bring them back. What I can do, however, is honor their memory by remaining fully present for whatever demands my immediate, practical attention right now. Josen stooped, picked up a single fallen leaf, and quietly studied its intricate network of veins. If I dedicate this journey to being lost in circular thoughts of regret or worry, I miss the opportunity to appreciate the profound beauty they themselves would have wanted me to see. If I am too utterly distracted by my own pain to listen carefully to the people we encounter, I might overlook crucial chances to offer assistance to someone in need. He was fully present with his sorrow, but he was not consumed by it. Now I truly understand, Kaku whispered softly. You are not peaceful because you are protected from problems. You are peaceful because you possess the knowledge of how to be fully present with whatever problems arise. Josen nodded slowly in confirmation. Mindfulness does not possess the power to make difficulties instantly disappear, but it absolutely prevents us from compounding our difficulties by fiercely fighting against them or futilely attempting to run away. When we are able to stay present, even with sharp pain, we invariably discover that we are far stronger and more resilient than we ever imagined. This profound narrative illustrates that mindfulness is certainly not a fair-weather practice, effective only when life flows smoothly. It is, in fact, especially invaluable during our most challenging and difficult times, precisely because it stops us from adding layers of unnecessary mental and emotional turmoil to the actual difficulties we are already enduring. Josen's composed response to tragedy clearly demonstrates that being present does not equate to being emotionally cold or detached. He allowed himself to feel his grief completely, yet he did not become lost within it. He fully experienced his sorrow without allowing it to seize control of his entire being. This illustrates the middle way taught in Buddhism, neither suppressing our natural human emotions nor permitting ourselves to be utterly overwhelmed by them. When we encounter loss, disappointment, or a genuine crisis, Our minds habitually exacerbate the situation by generating elaborate narratives about how terrible everything is, how life is fundamentally unfair, or how we will never possibly recover from the setback. These mental projections, these additions to the direct, actual experience, ultimately create far more suffering than the original external problem ever could inflict on its own. Mindful presence provides a radically different and more effective way to confront difficulty. Instead of reflexively fighting against painful emotions or passively drowning beneath them, we acquire the skill of simply being present with them. When we consciously breathe with our sadness rather than resisting its flow, when we acknowledge our fear without allowing ourselves to be controlled by it, we unlock a capacity within ourselves to handle far more stress and difficulty than we previously believed possible. This teaching offers immense relief, because it means we are not required to wait for life to become miraculously problem-free before we can access peace. We can consciously cultivate a sense of inner peace even while standing in the midst of profound challenges, simply by staying present for what is actually happening, rather than becoming lost in our mental stories about what is happening. The Buddhist path wisely recognizes that suffering is an unavoidable, natural component of human existence. Yet, it instructs us that the vast majority of our suffering stems directly from our resistance to present-moment reality. When we cultivate the ability to meet each successive moment with mindful attention, even the most difficult moments become workable. We cease wasting precious energy fighting against what has already occurred, and instead, we channel that energy toward responding wisely, effectively, and compassionately. As you take a moment to rest in this understanding, feel how the practice of presence naturally generates a foundational sense of groundedness and stability. Even if your life is currently filled with challenges or acute uncertainties, this precise moment right now is manageable. You have the capacity to breathe with whatever you are presently experiencing. You can commit to being present for your own life as it unfolds, not as you desperately wish it were, but exactly as it actually is. This is the liberating gift that the practice of mindfulness offers. It is not the elimination of all human problems, but the profound discovery that we possess the ability to meet any problem with awareness, stability, and grace. It is not a promise that life will always be comfortable, but the acquisition of the wisdom necessary to locate peace within whatever circumstances life happens to deliver. When we finally learn to rest completely and securely in the present moment, we inevitably find the deep, sustaining peace that these ancient Buddhist teachings have been directing us toward all along. Deep in the remote mountains, there resided a scholar named Hayato, who had dedicated his entire adult life to the rigorous study of Buddhist philosophy. His small, isolated house was crammed from floor to ceiling with stacks of ancient texts, commentaries, and bulky volumes detailing the teachings from every known school of Buddhist thought. Hayato possessed the ability to recite complex philosophical arguments entirely from memory and could expound upon the most subtle points of doctrine with impressive, intellectual precision. He spent his long days reading, compiling notes, and drafting his own erudite commentaries on the great works of Buddhist literature. Consequently, he had developed a celebrated reputation as one of the most learned Buddhist scholars in the entire region. Students occasionally undertook the demanding journey to his mountain retreat, seeking guidance and hoping to benefit from his truly vast academic knowledge. Yet, despite the tremendous scope of his learning, Hayato sensed that something fundamental was absent. His intellectual understanding was complete in theory, but in practice, he often felt as bewildered and confused about life as any ordinary person. When confronted with simple daily problems or difficult emotions, his scholarly knowledge offered disappointingly little practical utility. He could explain the intricate nature of suffering in elaborate detail, yet he continued to suffer personally. He could describe the path to enlightenment flawlessly, yet he felt entirely distant from the enlightened state. One cold winter morning, an old woman appeared unexpectedly at Hayato's door. She was frail and bent with age, dressed in the humble clothing of a peasant, and carried a small bundle of winter vegetables. She appeared to be just another village farmer, certainly not someone who could possibly possess anything of value to teach a great academic scholar. "Excuse me, sir," she requested in a humble voice. "I have been walking through the deep snow all night, and I am desperately cold and tired. Might I have your permission to sit by your fire for a short time to warm myself?" Hayato felt a flash of annoyance at the interruption to his intense studies, but his academic grounding in Buddhist training reminded him of the ethical importance of compassion. Reluctantly, he permitted the woman to enter and settle down near his small hearth. As the warmth slowly began to seep into her frail body, the old woman observed the towering piles of books covering virtually every surface of the room. "My goodness," she said with apparent awe. "You must be profoundly wise to have read so many volumes about Buddhism." Hayato's chest visibly swelled with intellectual pride. "Yes," he confirmed. "I have rigorously studied Buddhist philosophy for over 30 years. I am familiar with the teachings of all the great masters. There is likely no question concerning Buddhist doctrine that I am incapable of answering." The old woman seemed genuinely impressed. "How wonderful," she replied. "I am only a simple farmer, but I have always puzzled over a single thing. Perhaps you, great scholar, could help me finally understand." "Of course," Hayato assured her, delighted to have an immediate opportunity to demonstrate his formidable knowledge to someone who would surely be overwhelmed by his intellectual wisdom. The woman remained silent for a moment, gazing reflectively into the flames of the fire. Then she simply asked, "What is Buddha?" Hayato immediately launched into an elaborate, exhaustive explanation. He lectured on the historical figure of the Buddha, detailed the concept of Buddha nature, and meticulously outlined the different bodies of Buddha recognized across various philosophical systems. He quoted ancient sutras and cited numerous famous masters. He spoke for nearly an hour, covering every technical aspect of Buddhahood that his meticulous scholarly training had instilled in him. When he finally concluded his treatise, he looked at the elderly woman expectantly, waiting for her to express profound amazement at his intellectual display. Instead, she merely looked confused. "I am sorry," she said apologetically, "but I still do not truly understand. You have explained many things about the Buddha, but you have not actually told me what the Buddha is." Hayato felt a familiar flash of intellectual irritation. "I just explained it in great detail," he retorted. "Perhaps you were not listening carefully enough. The Buddha is the awakened one, the one who achieved complete enlightenment, the supreme teacher who showed us the path to liberation from suffering." "Yes, yes," the old woman interrupted gently. "But what is the Buddha? Not what the Buddha accomplished or what the Buddha teaches, but the essential nature of what the Buddha is." Hayato tried again, restructuring his explanation, this time deploying different terminology and approaching the question from various esoteric philosophical angles. But regardless of how he formulated his answer, the woman persistently returned to the same simple, unyielding question. "But what is Buddha?" After 2 exhausting hours of offering increasingly frustrated explanations, Hayato finally lost his temper. "Look, old woman," he snapped, his voice tight with disdain. "If you are truly incapable of grasping such basic Buddhist concepts, perhaps you ought to restrict yourself to farming and leave advanced philosophy to those who are actually capable of understanding it." The elderly woman looked at him with eyes that suddenly seemed profoundly wiser and deeper than they had moments before. "My dear scholar," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of experience, "you have devoted 30 years to learning about the Buddha, but you have never actually met the Buddha. You can describe the concept perfectly, but you do not truly know what the Buddha is." She stood up slowly and adjusted her small bundle of vegetables. True understanding is not discovered merely in books or abstract explanations, she continued. It is found solely through direct, embodied experience. You know what the Buddha did and what the Buddha taught, but you do not know what the Buddha is because you have never looked deep inside yourself to find the Buddha nature that inherently resides within you. As she moved toward the door, she paused and turned back, offering a gentle smile. I am just a simple farmer. As you correctly pointed out, I cannot read your complex books or explain your intricate philosophies. Yet, when I work the soil in my garden, I know Buddha. When I sit quietly in the stillness of the evening, I encounter Buddha. And when I extend a hand to a neighbor or offer food to a hungry animal, Buddha is undeniably present. I may not possess intellectual knowledge about Buddha, but I know Buddha directly. With those words, the old woman vanished into the swirling snowy morning, leaving Hayato standing alone amidst his thousands of scholarly books, and the sudden, hollow realization of his own intellectual emptiness. For many days thereafter, Hayato found himself completely unable to concentrate on his studies. The woman's unassuming question resonated constantly in his mind. What is Buddha? He was forced to confront the truth. Despite accumulating so much knowledge, he genuinely could not answer this fundamental question based on direct, personal experience. He had mastered what others had written about Buddha, but he himself had never truly encountered Buddha firsthand. This unexpected encounter served as a profound turning point for Hayato. He didn't discard his books, but he began diligently balancing his rigorous scholarly study with the quiet discipline of simple meditation practice. Following the old woman's example, he started cultivating mindful attention to his daily activities, seeking the reality of Buddha in ordinary, lived moments rather than restricting the search to abstract philosophical texts. Slowly but surely, Hayato's understanding transitioned from a conceptual construct carried solely in his head to a deeply felt reality experienced in his heart. His accumulated knowledge blossomed into genuine wisdom, not through the acquisition of new facts, but because he finally began living the principles he had long understood only intellectually. This powerful story clearly illuminates one of Buddhism's most essential distinctions: the gulf between intellectual knowledge and genuine experiential wisdom. We might immerse ourselves in spiritual teachings for years, becoming eloquent experts in explaining complex doctrines. However, this academic type of knowledge frequently remains detached and separate from the reality of our actual lived experience. Hayato's interaction with the farmer reveals that authentic understanding is not contained within books alone, regardless of how many we read or how skillfully we interpret them. True wisdom surfaces when we cease the effort of merely collecting information about truth and instead begin to directly experience that truth through our own heightened awareness and engaged daily life. The old woman in this narrative embodies the kind of simple, direct wisdom that the vastness of Buddhist teachings ultimately aims to convey. While she certainly couldn't have delivered scholarly lectures on the concept of Buddha nature, she knew that nature intimately through her own direct, unfiltered experience. Her understanding was dynamic, living, and immediately present, entirely free from abstract or theoretical concepts. This lesson holds particular relevance in our modern era, where we have access to more spiritual information than perhaps any generation before us. We can consume thousands of books, watch countless instructional videos, and attend endless workshops discussing enlightenment and inner peace. Yet, this sheer accumulation of data will never deliver the profound peace promised by these teachings unless we commit to actively experiencing and embodying what we are studying. Fundamentally, the Buddhist path is not a pursuit of intellectual superiority regarding spirituality. Rather, it is about becoming more acutely awake and attuned to the reality that is already perfectly present within every moment. When we attempt to conceptualize and analyze our way to peace, relying solely on thinking, we frequently find ourselves moving further away from the direct, palpable experience that would genuinely grant us tranquility. Take a moment to draw a gentle breath right now, observing the stark difference between merely thinking about breathing and actively, sensuously experiencing the breath. This simple distinction perfectly encapsulates the profound wisdom the old woman attempted to share. Truth, according to this view, is not something we logically deduce with our analytical minds, but something we fully encounter and realize with our entire being. Let us explore this crucial teaching further through a separate story, one that demonstrates how authentic wisdom often stems not from possessing a repository of answers, but from having the insight to ask the most meaningful questions. There once existed a monastery renowned for the monks' intense and often fiery debates concerning Buddhist philosophy. Every evening, once their labors were complete, they would congregate in the main hall, engaging in elaborate, detailed discussions regarding the ultimate nature of reality, the profound meaning of the core teachings, and the authoritative interpretation of ancient textual commentaries. A young monk named Goro was particularly captivated by these intellectual sparring matches. He was quick-witted and exceptionally well-read, taking immense personal pride in his skill at dominating arguments and proving his fellow monks incorrect. He routinely spent his days diligently preparing clever rhetorical points and immersing himself in the study of obscure texts. Also, he could dazzle everyone with the depth of his knowledge during the evening discussions. One day, a new monk named Tekken arrived at the monastery. He seemed notably distinct from the others. He was older, perhaps in his 60s, possessing hands that were deeply weathered, and a quiet demeanor that spoke volumes about years of manual labor rather than formal scholarly study. During the lively evening debates, he always sat quietly in the back, listening intently, yet consistently refraining from participation. This protracted silence deeply puzzled Goro. How, he wondered, could anyone possibly sit through such intellectually fascinating discussions without feeling compelled to contribute their perspective? After observing Tekken's quiet reserve for a full week, Goro finally decided to prod him into the conversation. During a particularly heated exchange concerning the philosophical nature of emptiness, Goro turned abruptly to the newcomer and challenged him directly. "Brother Tekken, you have listened to our vigorous discussions all week without uttering a single word. Surely you must harbor some opinion regarding whether phenomena are empty of inherent existence." All attention immediately shifted to Tekken, who appeared mildly uncomfortable at being suddenly thrust into the spotlight. He remained silent for an extended moment before finally responding with quiet humility. "I apologize, but I genuinely don't understand the exact meaning of inherent existence. Could you possibly explain that concept to me?" Goro felt a surge of delight. This was a perfect opportunity to showcase his superior knowledge to someone who was clearly philosophically disadvantaged. He eagerly launched into a detailed, dense explanation of emptiness philosophy, liberally employing technical terms and citing obscure ancient masters. When Goro eventually concluded his discourse, Tekken slowly nodded. "Thank you for that explanation," he said gently. "But I'm still not quite sure I follow. Could you perhaps provide me with a tangible example of something that possesses inherent existence and something that does not?" Goro, keen to demonstrate his mastery, was happy to oblige. He spent another 20 minutes furnishing detailed examples and further elaborating on the nuances of his philosophical understanding. Yet, when he finished, Tekken posed another deceptively simple question, which clearly indicated that the older monk still hadn't fully grasped the intellectual concept. This precise pattern repeated itself over several consecutive evenings. Tekken would pose seemingly innocent questions that appeared to expose his utter lack of sophisticated intellectual understanding, while Goro would respond with increasingly complex and elaborate explanations. The other monks quickly began to view Tekken as rather simple-minded, incapable of truly grasping the intricate ideas they debated so skillfully. However, a subtle and strange transformation was beginning to occur. As Goro struggled to convey these abstract concepts to a man who appeared utterly devoid of philosophical background, he found himself obligated to scrutinize his own understanding with far greater care. Tekken's simple, unadorned questions forced Goro to pause and genuinely consider what he actually meant by the technical jargon he employed so confidently. One evening, Tekken posed a question that brought Goro's intellectual momentum to a complete halt. "Brother Goro, you have patiently explained emptiness to me many times now, and for that I am truly grateful. But I must ask, when you are not actively explaining emptiness, when you are simply living your daily life, how does this sophisticated understanding transform the way you experience washing the dishes or sweeping the floors?" Goro opened his mouth, prepared to launch a defense, but found no words forthcoming. He was struck by a powerful realization. Despite all his elaborate, sophisticated explanations, his conceptual understanding of emptiness had never once altered his experience of ordinary, mundane activities. It remained purely an intellectual concept, entirely segregated from his lived reality. "I'm not sure," he finally admitted, experiencing a deep flush of embarrassment for the first time in years. Tekken offered a gentle, knowing smile. "Thank you for that honesty. You see, I spent 40 years working as a farmer before I arrived here. I never mastered the precise names for Buddhist concepts, and I certainly cannot participate in philosophical debates. Yet, when I plant tiny seeds in the vast, empty expanse of the soil, I experience something that may well correspond to what you call emptiness. When I observe the crops thriving through their interdependence with the sun, the rain, and the earth, I witness what you might label dependent origination." He paused deliberately, casting his gaze around the gathered monks. "I initially came here hoping to learn the formal names for the profound realities I had already experienced in my daily labor. But I am starting to suspect that perhaps the names themselves are not the most important element. Perhaps the direct experience is what truly matters." A heavy silence descended upon the room. For the first time, many of the monks seriously began to question whether their high-level, sophisticated debates were actually guiding them toward genuine wisdom or inadvertently moving them further away. "Please don't misunderstand me," Tekken continued softly. "I am not suggesting that study holds no value. I am grateful for every explanation you have offered me. But I do wonder if sometimes we become so utterly engrossed in talking about the truth that we neglect the fundamental practice of actually living it." From that pivotal night onward, the entire atmosphere of the monastery's evening gatherings began to subtly shift. Instead of aggressively attempting to win intellectual debates focused purely on concepts, the monks began sharing how their philosophical understanding genuinely impacted their daily, moment-to-moment experience. Instead of competing solely to flaunt their encyclopedic knowledge, they started asking sincere, practical questions about how to embody greater wisdom and compassion in their lives. Goro came to realize that Tekken's deceptively simple questions were infinitely more valuable than all of his own clever, winning arguments. By compelling him to examine the practical implications of his knowledge, the older monk had initiated Goro's transformation from pure intellectual comprehension to authentic, lived wisdom. This narrative unveils another absolutely crucial dimension of Buddhist wisdom. True understanding is never measured by the volume of information we possess or our capability to articulate complex concepts, but rather by the depth to which our knowledge has meaningfully transformed the way we navigate our actual lives. Tekken's method of learning was the precise inverse of the typical scholarly approach. Instead of attempting to rapidly accumulate more raw information, he focused intensely on connecting that theoretical information to his immediate, direct experience. Instead of seeking to impress his peers with intellectual prowess, he was simply genuinely curious about how this understanding could tangibly improve his daily existence. The probing questions Tekken posed held greater value than the entirety of Goro's detailed explanations, primarily because they highlighted the enormous gaps separating knowing about something from knowing something directly through experience. We might thoroughly memorize every single teaching regarding compassion, but until we actively become measurably more compassionate in our daily interactions and choices, our knowledge remains fundamentally incomplete. This understanding offers profound spiritual relief, as it frees us from the requirement of becoming academic scholars or recognized experts to benefit deeply from Buddhist wisdom. We do not need to master every philosophical nuance or perfectly memorize complicated texts. We simply need to take the understanding we already possess, no matter how elementary, and diligently begin applying it to the reality of our actual experience. The deep, abiding peace promised by these teachings emerges not from achieving intellectual mastery, but from the gentle, gradual transformation of how we encounter life in each passing moment. When we cease striving to merely collect spiritual knowledge and instead wholeheartedly begin to embody spiritual principles, we realize that even the most basic understanding can catalyze profound, lasting changes in our experience. As you contemplate this teaching now, notice the subtle sense of relief that arises when you allow yourself to release the pressure to understand every single concept perfectly. The core of the Buddhist path is not about becoming a recognized expert in Buddhist philosophy. It is focused entirely on becoming more awake, more compassionate, and more peaceful, regardless of the external circumstances we encounter. The wisdom capable of generating true, deep transformation is frequently, and surprisingly, simple. It is reflected in the old woman who knew Buddha through the mindfulness of her daily work, and in Tekken who apprehended emptiness through the simple act of farming. We discover the profoundest teachings reflected in our most ordinary, common activities when we approach them with genuine attention and gentle care. This realized understanding naturally culminates in the kind of unshakable peace that permits both the body and the mind to rest completely and profoundly. When we finally stop the mental struggle to logically figure everything out and instead begin experiencing life directly with the totality of our being, we immediately discover the sanctuary of presence, the very place toward which these ancient teachings have consistently pointed. Let us now consider a fisherman named Ichiro, who resided in a small coastal village where his family had fished the same sea lanes for generations. Ichiro possessed a truly beautiful boat, which his grandfather had meticulously constructed by hand, complete with intricate carved wooden details and a sail designed to perfectly harness the wind. This vessel was far more than just his means of livelihood. It was his deepest source of pride and personal joy. He dedicated countless hours each week to polishing its precious wood and carefully mending its nets, ensuring every component remained in flawless condition. Ichiro was widely recognized throughout the village as the most consistently successful fisherman. His nets seemed unerringly guided toward the richest schools of fish, and his intuitive knowledge of the ocean's subtle moods and shifting patterns was unmatched by anyone. Other fishermen would observe him launching his vessel every morning, secretly hoping to somehow discover his unique secrets. But Ichiro had developed such a powerful attachment, not just to his flawless boat, but also to the reputation of his success, that the act of fishing itself had ceased to be enjoyable. Every single morning, he awoke burdened by anxiety, worried about the changing weather, stressed about whether the fish would be running, and fearful that some unforeseen event might damage his precious, revered boat. He often spent the entire night before a trip checking and obsessively rechecking his equipment. Sleepless due to constant planning and intense worry, Ichiro's excessive attachment to the outcome, catching fish, rendered him perpetually tense, calculating, and driven. He became intensely frustrated when other fishermen enjoyed good luck in areas where he had come up empty. He would hastily cut his trips short if the fishing seemed slow, or conversely, he would push himself to the brink of exhaustion when the fish were plentiful, terrified of missing even a single opportunity for gain. One fateful morning, Ichiro was devastated to discover his beloved boat had been stolen during the night. Someone had severed the mooring rope and quietly taken the vessel out to sea while the entire village slept soundly. Ichiro stood motionless on the dock, gazing into the empty stretch of water where his boat had rested, feeling as if his entire established identity had evaporated along with it. The other fishermen offered their sincere sympathy and help, but most of their personal boats were barely sufficient for one person, much less two. In the end, only old Saburo, whose tiny, rickety fishing vessel appeared held together by little more than patches and frayed rope, offered to take Ichiro out with him. Ichiro had historically viewed Saburo's poor equipment and invariably modest catches with thinly veiled disdain. The old man's boat constantly looked as though it might founder at any second, and his fishing nets were so extensively aged and mended that they appeared to consist more of stitched patches than original material. But having absolutely no other recourse, Ichiro reluctantly accepted the offer. As they paddled out slowly in Saburo's tiny, leaking boat, Ichiro was overwhelmed by a mixture of embarrassment and intense anxiety. How could he possibly hope to catch fish with such pitifully inadequate equipment? What if his competitors saw him in this pathetic vessel? His highly prized reputation as the most successful fisherman would surely be shattered. Yet, once they reached the fishing grounds, something entirely unforeseen transpired. Freed from the constant need to protect and worry about his perfect boat and meticulously maintained equipment, Ichiro found his awareness drawn toward details he had never previously noticed. He began observing the subtle, intuitive way Saburo read the water, not through sophisticated academic knowledge, but through simple, profound, quiet observation. The old man would remain perfectly still for long stretches, simply listening to the natural rhythm of the waves and feeling the gentle, deep movement of the current beneath them. When Saburo finally cast his patched nets, he did so completely devoid of any sense of urgency or stressful attachment to the result. If the nets surfaced empty, he would simply move on to try another location. If they returned full, he would offer a quiet, satisfied smile and calmly continue his labor. "Saburo," Ichiro inquired, puzzled, "aren't you worried that your nets might suddenly tear? They honestly look like they could disintegrate at any moment." The old man merely chuckled softly. "They might, of course. They have torn countless times before, and I have diligently mended them. If they tear again today, I will mend them tonight. If they fall completely apart, then I will simply construct new ones. The fish, you see, do not seem to care how pretty the nets are." As that remarkable day unfolded, Ichiro discovered himself relaxing in a way he had been incapable of for years. Without his own valuable equipment to obsessively maintain and protect, he was finally free to focus entirely on the core experience of fishing itself. He began to fondly recall why he had loved being out on the water as a young boy, long before fishing devolved into a stressful pursuit of success and reputation. To his astonishment, they landed more fish that day than he had caught in weeks using his sophisticated boat and high-end equipment. Crucially, however, he enjoyed the simple experience in a manner he had almost forgotten was even possible. "How exactly is this happening?" he asked Saburo openly. "Your equipment is terribly old and simple, yet we are having such unexpected success." Saburo merely smiled gently as he hauled in yet another heavily laden net of fish. "Perhaps it is because I am completely unafraid of losing anything," he suggested. "My boat is already in the process of falling apart, so I don't worry about scratching it. My nets are already heavily patched, so I have no fear of tearing them. When you are not constantly expending energy protecting possessions, you are truly free to focus completely and utterly on the task at hand." That evening, as they made their way back to shore, Ichiro experienced a profound realization. The loss of his treasured boat had somehow liberated him from a form of imprisonment he hadn't even recognized. His intense attachment to possessing flawless equipment had actively prevented him from fishing with the relaxed, natural ease and acute attention that were, ironically, the true keys to success. Over the subsequent weeks, while awaiting word on the recovery of his stolen vessel, Ichiro continued fishing alongside Saburo. Each day offered new, humbling discoveries about how his insistence on having the absolute best equipment had inadvertently been making him an inferior fisherman. His ceaseless, anxious preoccupation with protecting his possessions had created a mental block, preventing him from being fully present for the work itself. When his beautiful boat was finally located and returned to him, Ichiro faced a truly defining choice. He could revert entirely to his old, success-driven way of fishing, complete with its accompanying anxiety and attachment. Or, he could wholeheartedly embrace the profound sense of freedom he had discovered through Saburo's simple, non-attached approach. Ichiro chose to keep his magnificent boat, but resolved to fish with a fundamentally changed attitude. He continued to meticulously maintain his equipment, yet he no longer lived in paralyzing fear of its potential loss. He still labored diligently to catch fish, but he refused to allow his success or failure on the water to dictate or undermine his inner peace of mind. He had learned the vital distinction between genuinely caring for something and being utterly enslaved by it. Years later, when younger fishermen approached Ichiro seeking wisdom, he would offer this counsel: take excellent care of your equipment, but never allow your equipment to take care of or control you. Love your vocation, but do not permit your work to become your demanding master. The most fruitful fishing occurs only when you are completely unafraid of returning home empty-handed. This final story unveils one of Buddhism's most profoundly liberating insights regarding the true nature of attachment. We mistakenly assume that loving something requires grasping onto it tightly, yet authentic love necessitates and allows for freedom. Ichiro's experience demonstrated that his fierce attachment to his boat and his reputation for success was, in fact, actively blocking him from enjoying the very activities he believed he was working so hard to protect. The Buddhist concept of non-attachment is frequently misconstrued as indifference or a generalized apathy toward everything. Saburo's quiet example, however, reveals its authentic meaning. He cared deeply about the act of fishing, yet he was neither enslaved by the condition of his equipment nor obsessively focused on achieving specific outcomes. This profound inner freedom enabled him to respond naturally, fluidly, and skillfully to whatever circumstances each new day presented. Non-attachment certainly does not imply that we cease having preferences or abandon striving toward goals. Ichiro, after his transformation, still preferred catching fish over failing to catch fish, and he maintained his returned boat with care. But he learned to hold these preferences lightly, refusing to allow them to control his fundamental peace of mind or distract him from being fully present for the richness of the experience itself. This core teaching fundamentally transforms how we interact with everything we value in life. Our most intimate relationships become deeper and more genuinely loving when we release the urge to possess and control the people we cherish. Our professional work becomes vastly more fulfilling when we are no longer enslaved by an insatiable need for external recognition and defining success. Even our material possessions yield greater joy when we are able to appreciate them fully without simultaneously living in constant fear of their eventual loss. The deep peace that Buddhist teachings extend to us stems, in part, from this very liberation, the release from the relentless anxiety fueled by constant protection and control. When we master the ability to engage fully with life while remaining detached from specific, predetermined outcomes, we uncover an innate freedom that no external circumstance or event can possibly diminish or remove. Take a gentle breath now, and simply feel how this understanding instantaneously creates spaciousness within your heart. Notice how the mere thought of holding your preferences more lightly brings a noticeable sense of relief, akin to setting down a heavy, cumbersome burden you hadn't even realized you were perpetually carrying. Let us delve deeper into this profound wisdom through one final story, which illustrates how non-attachment can radically transform even our relationship with our deeply held self-identity and celebrated personal achievements. Master Ryanan was universally regarded as one of the most strikingly beautiful and highly accomplished women of her entire generation. Born into an affluent noble family, she received the most elite education available, achieving mastery in poetry, calligraphy, music, and dance. Her physical beauty was so legendary throughout the region that countless wealthy and prominent men sought her hand in marriage. Despite all this worldly acclaim, Ryanan felt an undeniable, intense calling toward a spiritual life. Defying her family's vehement objections and society's rigid expectations, she made the firm decision to become a Buddhist nun. She approached numerous monasteries, yet consistently faced refusal. The abbots, upon seeing her exceptional beauty, would immediately deny her entry. "Your striking appearance would serve as an insurmountable distraction for our monks," they would explain. "You ought to marry and pursue a conventional life. The demanding monastic path is simply not appropriate for a woman such as yourself." Ryanan remained absolutely determined to follow her spiritual calling, but her profound physical beauty had become an insurmountable, defining obstacle. She began to comprehend that both her own attachment to her appearance and society's obsessive focus on it were actively preventing her from living the deeply meaningful life she truly desired. After suffering rejection from the 7th monastery she had approached, Ryanan made a severe, radical decision. She returned immediately to her home and went straight to the kitchen, where she heated a large iron pot until it glowed intensely red. Then, without a moment of hesitation, she pressed the searing metal firmly against her face, permanently and disfiguringly scarring herself. The physical agony was immense, yet the emotional liberation she experienced was instantaneous. She had violently freed herself from the immense burden of exceptional beauty that had previously defined the entirety of her life. She was no longer the beautiful Ryanan, but simply Ryanan, a dedicated woman earnestly seeking spiritual understanding. When she presented herself at the 8th monastery with her face deeply scarred, the abbot accepted her application without delay. Her radical willingness to sacrifice her most highly prized external possession, her beauty, clearly demonstrated the absolute depth of her commitment to the rigors of spiritual practice. In the many years that followed, Ryanan earned renown not for her physical appearance, but for the clarity of her wisdom and the extent of her compassion. She composed sublime poetry that captured profound spiritual insights, and her teachings guided countless students toward an understanding of the path to liberation. One of her most celebrated poems, written many years after her self-scarring, poignantly states, "To truly serve Buddha, I marked my face with fire, yet the flames that scarred my outer features long ago are insignificant compared to the cleansing fire burning within my soul." Both fires ultimately lead to the same singular place of profound peace. Students would occasionally ask Ryanan if she ever regretted the drastic act of destroying her beauty. She would simply smile gently and respond, "I destroyed absolutely nothing. I merely liberated myself from the confining prison of others' expectations and the chains of my own attachment. The beauty that truly mattered was always residing within." But perhaps the most profound lesson contained within Ryanan's story unfolded near the end of her earthly life. A young, novice nun approached her and said, "Master, I deeply admire your sacrifice, but I cannot conceive of being brave enough to physically destroy my own appearance as you did. Where did you find such incredible courage?" Ryanan looked at her earnest student with eyes brimming with gentle wisdom. "I didn't destroy my appearance as an act of courage," she explained. "I destroyed it out of attachment. My desire to become a nun was so profound, so attached, that I was willing to sacrifice my entire identity, my physical appearance, to achieve that singular goal. The young nun looked visibly confused. But isn't deep dedication to the spiritual path something positive? Dedication, certainly, Ryanin affirmed, but not attachment. When I mutilated my face with fire, I genuinely believed I was demonstrating my complete devotion to the Buddha. In truth, I was only demonstrating my intense attachment to a specific, desired identity, that of being a nun. I had merely exchanged the bondage of one form of clinging for another. She paused, her gaze settling on the tranquil monastery garden where the flowers were blooming and fading in accordance with their natural, effortless cycles. Authentic freedom, she continued, is not achieved by altering our external circumstances, but by entirely releasing our fierce grip on all identities we hold, even the most sacred, spiritual ones. The ultimate truth, the Buddha I desperately sought by becoming a nun, was exactly the same truth that was fully present when I was living as a beautiful woman in my father's house. I was simply incapable of recognizing it then because I was utterly enslaved by my attachment to my own physical appearance. So, was your painful sacrifice ultimately meaningless? The student ventured to ask. Ryanin offered a soft smile. No, she said. It was entirely necessary for me at that critical time. Paradoxically, sometimes we must push ourselves to destructive extremes just to truly understand the meaning of balance and moderation. My scarred face became the teacher that no amount of sutra study could have replaced. It revealed to me that genuine liberation does not arise from changing our physical appearance or the roles we occupy in the world, but from fundamentally altering the intensity with which we cling to those temporary definitions. This profound account beautifully illustrates the many interwoven layers of the Buddhist teachings concerning attachment and the illusory nature of identity. Ryanin's early fixation on her beauty blocked her path to the spiritual life she craved. Yet, her subsequent, intense fixation on becoming a nun drove her to an extreme, violent action which, while effective in achieving her immediate goal, was itself merely another sophisticated form of spiritual clinging. The profoundest wisdom she acquired stems from her mature recognition that true liberation does not necessitate destroying or fundamentally altering our life circumstances. Instead, it demands that we radically change our internal relationship to those very circumstances. We are capable of being beautiful or scarred, immensely wealthy or utterly poor, highly accomplished or quite ordinary, and still discover the exact same liberation simply by releasing our tenacious attachment to these fluctuating conditions. This specific teaching holds particular relevance in our contemporary culture, which incessantly pressures us to define ourselves based on external metrics. Our appearance, our material possessions, our professional achievements, or the roles we play. We mistakenly believe that we are our job title, our relationship status, our physical appearance, or our social standing. However, the ancient Buddhist wisdom instructs us that while these identities may be temporarily useful, they do not constitute our authentic, unchanging nature. The sense of peace derived from this profound understanding is immense because it guarantees that our intrinsic well-being is not contingent upon maintaining any specific set of external conditions. We are released from the exhausting obligation to remain eternally young, perpetually successful, unfailingly healthy, or constantly admired to feel fundamentally secure. Our deepest, most unshakable security arises from recognizing that core element of ourselves that remains utterly unchanged irrespective of our fluid, ever-shifting circumstances. Ryanin's ultimate realization points toward the highest teaching of non-attachment. It demonstrates that even our most earnest spiritual practices and achievements can subtly transform into new forms of self-imposed bondage if we cling to them too rigidly. The genuine goal is not the attainment of the label perfect meditator or enlightened being, but rather the clear recognition of the freedom that is constantly present, regardless of our spiritual progress or accomplishments. This recognition does not imply that we cease effort or abandon our commitment to growth and development. Instead, it teaches us to hold our spiritual journey lightly, engaging wholeheartedly in the present while remaining unattached to any specific, predetermined outcomes. Like Ichiro, learning to fish without the anxiety of failure, we too can pursue our practice without being enslaved by the desperate need for spiritual success. As you pause and rest in this teaching now, genuinely consider the possibility of releasing your tight grip on whatever identities you currently cling to, be it the need to be successful, to be universally liked, to always be right, or even the identity of being deeply spiritual. Notice the expansive, light feeling that arises when you hold these aspects of yourself much more gently. This state is the ultimate liberation that Buddhist teachings illuminate, not freedom from having preferences or responsibilities, but the profound freedom from being controlled by them. It is not freedom from caring about life, but the radical freedom to care deeply without suffering when events inevitably deviate from our desired plans. In this spacious state of non-attachment, we locate the deep and abiding peace that enables us to engage wholeheartedly and fully with the currents of life while maintaining an unshakably calm center. This is the true sanctuary offered by these ancient teachings, an internal place of rest that no external change or turmoil can ever disturb, precisely because it is entirely independent of anything external whatsoever. High in the mountains above a small village lived a woodcutter named Dai, who had dedicated his entire life to the rigorous work of cutting and selling firewood. Each morning, he ascended the steep forest paths, carefully selected the appropriate trees, and spent the day felling and splitting wood. Every evening, he returned home, tired but deeply satisfied with his simple, honest labor. Dai had always narrowly defined himself as just a woodcutter, nothing more, nothing less. He saw himself as uneducated, unlike the village scholars, not wealthy, like the local merchants, and certainly not artistic like the dedicated craftsmen. When others inquired about his profession, he would state plainly, "I cut wood. That's the extent of what I know." One afternoon, working deep within the familiar forest, Dai heard peculiar noises emanating from a nearby grove. Following the sounds, he discovered a group of traveling monks who had completely lost their way while attempting to journey between monasteries. They sat beside a small stream, looking worried and completely disoriented. Their leader, an elderly abbot, approached Dai with deep respect. "Excuse me, good friend," the abbot said. "We have been walking aimlessly for 2 days now and cannot locate the main path. Are you familiar with these mountains?" Dai nodded firmly. "I have walked these very paths for 40 years, he responded. "I know every stream, every stand of trees in these mountains." The abbot's face immediately brightened with immense relief. "Would you, by any chance, be able to guide us back to the main road leading toward Zenzen Temple? We would be profoundly grateful for your assistance." Dai agreed without hesitation, despite the loss of a full day's work. He began leading the group of 15 monks through trails that appeared utterly trackless to them, yet were as intimately familiar to him as the floor plan of his own small home. As they proceeded, the monks were astonished by Dai's detailed, intuitive knowledge of the environment. "How can you be so certain this path leads to the main road?" one monk inquired, watching as Dai guided them effortlessly through what looked like impossibly dense, pathless woods. "I can discern it by the direction the moss grows on the tree trunks," Dai patiently explained. "The moss is always thicker on the north side, and I know the road cuts through this valley running east-west. Moreover, I can hear the faint rush of the river that follows the road." The monks strained their ears, realizing they could detect nothing but the immediate sounds of the forest floor. Nevertheless, as they faithfully followed Dai, They soon reached the river, and shortly thereafter the wide, familiar main road. During the journey, Dai continued to share his accumulated knowledge quite naturally. He identified which plants were safe for consumption, which could be used to treat small injuries, where the clearest water springs were located, and how to accurately read the forthcoming weather signs in the subtle movements of the sky and wind. You possess such immense knowledge about living in perfect harmony with nature, one young monk observed with palpable admiration. Have you acquired all this wisdom through scholarly books? Dai gave a hearty laugh. I cannot read books, he replied. I simply pay close attention to the lessons the forest offers me every single day. When you dedicate enough time to the trees and the streams, they eventually disclose everything you need to know. Once they reached the safe road that led toward the monk's destination, the abbot clasped Dai's hands in a gesture of profound gratitude. My friend, you have rescued us from a truly perilous situation. How might we adequately repay your immense kindness? No payment is necessary, Dai insisted. I was simply pleased to be of service. But the abbot persisted. You define yourself as merely a woodcutter. Yet today you have stood before us as our teacher. You have revealed a deep wisdom regarding the language of nature that none of our sacred texts contain. You have shown pure compassion by aiding strangers without the slightest expectation of reward. You have shared your specialized knowledge freely and guided us with unwavering patience. The old monk looked directly into Dai's eyes. Tell me what truly defines a teacher. Is it the accumulation of knowledge from countless books? Or is it having learned essential truths from life itself and sharing that vital learning with others who are in need? Dai fell silent for a long moment, deeply considering the unexpected question. I suppose being a teacher is about sharing what you know in order to alleviate the burdens of others. And what criterion defines true wisdom? The abbot continued gently. Is it mastery over complex philosophical theories? Or is it possessing the fundamental understanding of how to live a life that is skillful, peaceful, and good? Dai paused again, reflecting with care. Perhaps wisdom is simply knowing how to cooperate and work harmoniously with life, rather than constantly struggling and fighting against its inevitable currents. The abbot smiled radiantly. Then you are unquestionably both a teacher and a wise man, whether you choose to claim these titles for yourself or not. You have imparted more essential knowledge to us in this single afternoon than we have absorbed during many days of intense formal study. As the monks resumed their long journey, Dai walked slowly back into the solitude of the forest, turning the abbot's words over and over in his mind. For 4 decades, he had stubbornly defined himself as just a woodcutter. Yet these strangers had seen him as an indispensable teacher and guide. Which definition held the truth? That night, sitting by his flickering fire and eating his customary simple dinner, Dai profoundly reflected on the unexpected exchange. He realized he had trapped himself within a narrow, self-imposed definition of his own identity. He had automatically assumed that the role of a woodcutter was inherently less valuable than that of a respected scholar or a dedicated monk. The abbot, however, had successfully helped him recognize that his profound, practical knowledge and his innate compassion were, in themselves, the highest expressions of wisdom. In the weeks that followed, Dai began observing aspects of himself and his life that had previously gone unrecognized. When his neighbors sought his counsel regarding practical dilemmas, he recognized that he was quite clearly teaching. When he assisted lost travelers in finding their route, he was demonstrating deep, active compassion. When he worked seamlessly and in harmony with the ancient, natural rhythms of the forest, he understood that he was engaging in an effortless, pure form of meditation. Not a single external aspect of his daily routine had changed, yet his internal understanding of his own identity had expanded completely. He remained a woodcutter, but he realized he was fundamentally much more. A natural teacher, a reliable guide, a wise man, and a vital resource for his entire community. Many years later, when people inquired of Dai about the elusive nature of identity, he would respond thoughtfully. I once believed I was confined to being just a woodcutter. Then I realized I was also capable of being a teacher and a wise man. But eventually, I understood that all these labels are merely like temporary clothing that I wear. Beneath them all, I am simply a person who strives to be helpful and who endeavors to pay meticulous attention to the unfolding of life. That, it turns out, is more than sufficient. This heartwarming story brings to light one of Buddhism's most profound instructions concerning the self and identity. We commonly restrict ourselves by internalizing and accepting overly narrow definitions of who we believe we are. However, these identities are not immutable, fixed truths. They are merely narratives and conceptual stories that we constantly tell ourselves. We possess the inherent power to recognize the vast, fuller truth of our own being. Dai's transformation required neither a career change nor the acquisition of new skills. It only required him to see clearly beyond the restrictive label he had imposed upon himself. When he ceased defining himself as only a woodcutter, he was able to acknowledge the immense stores of wisdom, compassion, and practical knowledge he had organically cultivated through his simple, devoted work. This lesson is critically important because so many individuals suffer greatly from the conviction that they are just something ordinary or insignificant. Just a parent, just a wage worker, just a student. Yet, Buddhist wisdom asserts that there is no such thing as just anything. Every role, when approached with genuine attention and care, instantly transforms into a path for cultivating both wisdom and compassion. The essential truth that Dai discovered is that our deepest, most authentic identity is never located in a specific role or a list of achievements. It resides in our fundamental human capacity to pay diligent attention, to learn continuously from all experiences, and to actively help others. These essential qualities can flourish regardless of our external life circumstances. Whether we are woodcutters or distinguished scholars, parents or highly specialized professionals. This realization brings forth tremendous, immediate freedom because it confirms that we do not need to drastically change our external circumstances to uncover our inherent value. We do not require specialized education, impressive career titles, or recognized social status to be deemed worthy of self-acceptance and respect. The vital qualities of wisdom and compassion, which matter above all else, can mature and deepen through any sincere, dedicated engagement with life. Take a gentle, conscious breath now and sense how this teaching immediately creates space and release around any limiting ideas you might hold about yourself. Notice the expansive feeling of clarity that arises when you look beyond the fixed labels you have accepted and begin to recognize the comprehensive, fuller truth of who you genuinely are. Let us explore this profound wisdom further through another narrative, one that illustrates how our true nature is often obscured, not by external circumstances, but by our own erroneous preconceptions regarding what constitutes a valuable person. There was once a thriving monastery that dedicated itself to taking in orphan children, raising them as integral members of the community. One such child was a boy named Kodo, who had been discovered as an infant with no trace of his parentage or background. The monks raised him with exceptional love and care. Despite this nurturing, Kodo always felt subtly different from the others. Unlike the monks, who had consciously chosen their spiritual path, Kodo felt he belonged to no specific place. He was not officially a monk, having never taken the formal vows, but neither was he a regular village inhabitant, given his upbringing within the monastery walls. He assisted diligently with daily tasks and participated fully in temple life, yet he often carried a persistent feeling that he was merely existing, adrift without any clear purpose or stable identity. As Kodo matured into a young man, his sense of being an outsider intensified. He would observe the monks during their formal spiritual ceremonies and keenly feel his status as an onlooker. He would watch the village families during festivals and feel a deep envy for their clear, established family ties. He increasingly adopted the belief that he was nobody special, just a random individual who had, by sheer accident, ended up at the monastery. Then, one day, a renowned Zen master from the capital, Master Sojin, arrived to visit the temple. Master Sojin was celebrated across the entire region for his profound wisdom and his uncanny ability to perceive the true, underlying nature of everyone he encountered. The resident monks were thrilled to host such an honored guest, and they meticulously prepared their finest ceremonies and presentations, hoping to make a favorable impression. During Master Sojin's residency, every monk received an invitation for a private audience to receive personalized spiritual guidance. Kodo naturally assumed he would be excluded, as he held no official rank, but to his astonishment, he was called to meet the master just like the others. Kodo approached the meeting filled with nerves, uncertain of what he could possibly offer to such a significant teacher. He entered the small, austere room where Master Sojin was seated and bowed with sincere respect. "Please sit," the master invited kindly. "Tell me about yourself." "There truly isn't much to report, Master," Kodo responded humbly. "I am not anybody special, really. I was abandoned here as an infant, and the monks have been gracious enough to allow me to remain. I assist with the daily chores, but I possess no unique skills or specific life purpose. I'm just here." Master Sojin listened intently to Kodo's self-deprecating description, observing the boy's face with calm, gentle attention. When Kodo concluded, the master posed a simple, piercing question. "Who first told you that you are nobody special?" Kodo was completely taken aback by the question. "Well, no one told me directly," he stammered. "I just inherently know it to be true. I have no parents or family name. I have never taken vows nor achieved anything noteworthy. I am merely an orphan living at a monastery." "I understand," Master Sojin replied softly. "And who exactly informed you that having parents automatically renders someone special? Who established the decree that taking spiritual vows or accumulating achievements defines a person's intrinsic value?" Kodo felt a deep shift. He had never questioned these assumptions before. "I suppose I just internalized the idea that those external things were what truly mattered," he admitted. Master Sojin offered a kind, gentle smile. "Allow me to tell you what my eyes perceive when I look at you. I see a person who has been quietly shaped by the rhythms of dedicated spiritual practice since the moment of infancy. I see someone who has mastered the art of simple living and helping others selflessly, without needing or expecting recognition. I see a young man who has matured surrounded by pure wisdom and genuine compassion, and who has absorbed these vital qualities naturally into his very bones." The master leaned forward slightly. "Most people arrive at spiritual practice much later in life, burdened after their minds have become cluttered with worldly ambitions and confused, dualistic ideas. You, however, have been practicing diligently from the absolute beginning. Even if you never consciously labeled it as such, your ordinary, unassuming daily life has been a continuous, profound form of meditation." Kodo's confusion was evident. "But I have never achieved enlightenment or experienced the dramatic, profound realizations described in the stories of the great masters." "And how can you be certain of that?" Master Sojin inquired. "What do you fundamentally believe enlightenment looks like? Do you imagine it must be accompanied by dramatic visions or the manifestation of supernatural powers?" "I thought it would feel distinctly different somehow," Kodo replied. "I believed enlightened individuals felt inherently special, set apart from ordinary people." Master Sojin laughed gently. "My friend, you have been searching for enlightenment as if it were an extraordinary attainment meant to validate you and make you feel uniquely important. But what if enlightenment is, instead, simply the complete, radical acceptance of being fundamentally ordinary? What if true wisdom is discovered, not in striving to feel special, but in recognizing that every single being is already perfectly complete exactly as they are in this moment? He motioned toward the window, where the familiar sight of other monks engaged in their daily chores unfolded. Observe your brothers out there. They are sweeping floors, preparing meals, tending the garden. Are they somehow less wise when engaged in these simple tasks than when they are sitting in formal meditation? Is their innate Buddha nature only present during moments of structured practice? Kodo gazed at the familiar rhythms of daily monastery life with freshly opened eyes. He was beginning to grasp the profound truth the master was indicating. The Buddha nature you have been so earnestly seeking, Master Sojin elaborated, is not some hidden quality residing deep within you, awaiting discovery through some dramatic, special achievement. It is the very consciousness that has been looking through your eyes for your entire life. It is the awareness that has been flawlessly present during every moment of kindness, every act of service, every instant of simple, devoted attention to your daily chores. Master Sojin stood and placed a comforting, gentle hand on Kodo's shoulder. You arrived here telling me that you are nobody special. And in a crucial sense, you are absolutely correct. You are not special in the superficial way the ego demands importance. You are not important in the demanding way the conceptual mind seeks validation. But this very ordinariness you are so disappointed by is, in fact, your most invaluable gift. You have lived your entire existence without the crushing burden of attempting to artificially become someone important. And precisely because of that, you have remained uncontaminated and naturally who you really are. That evening, as Kodo returned to his customary tasks of assisting with dinner preparation and evening cleanup, everything felt precisely the same externally, yet completely different internally. He was performing the exact same duties, still living the same simple existence, but he was no longer living in anticipation, waiting for something better or bigger to finally happen. He was no longer desperately searching for a more impressive identity or a special achievement to confer value upon him. He recognized that the very act of seeking had been the singular barrier preventing him from recognizing the perfect completeness that was already present. We are not required to desperately earn our worthiness through professional accomplishments or lofty spiritual attainments. The very awareness that is processing these words right now, the consciousness that experiences your thoughts and feelings, is already fundamentally complete and perfectly whole exactly as it is. The core of the Buddhist path is not the process of becoming enlightened, but the simple act of recognizing the enlightenment that is effortlessly present. It is not about striving for some unique spiritual state, but about seeing clearly through the powerful illusion that we require any special state whatsoever to be whole. Just like Kodo, we often walk right past our natural, inherent wholeness while aggressively searching for something we deem more impressive. This understanding naturally fosters a deep, immediate sense of ease and profound acceptance. When we finally cease the effort of trying to be someone other than who we are, when we stop waiting for that future moment when we might finally be good enough or special enough, we are free to simply rest in the uncluttered truth of our present experience. As you settle into this instruction now, feel into the liberating possibility that you are already precisely who you are meant to be. This is not perfection in the sense of having no capacity for further growth or learning, but completeness in the absolute sense that your foundational nature lacks absolutely nothing. The peace offered by Buddhist teachings is not a prize you must achieve, but a reality you can recognize right here, right now, in the simple, undeniable fact of your own aware presence. This recognition is the supreme gift these ancient traditions bestow, not advanced techniques for personal improvement, but the core wisdom to see that beneath the layers of all our self-concepts, we are already perfectly whole. This foundational wholeness is what enables us to rest completely, knowing with certainty that we are home exactly where we are, in this moment. There once resided a master gardener named Yuki, whose name was celebrated throughout the region for cultivating the most breathtaking gardens anyone had ever witnessed. Her specialized passion was cherry trees, and visitors would travel from distant provinces solely to wander through her meticulously crafted grounds during the fleeting cherry blossom season. Yuki had devoted 40 years of her life to perfecting this delicate art. She possessed intimate knowledge of precisely which cherry varieties would flower at differing intervals, allowing her to orchestrate continuous, undulating waves of color that persisted for weeks. She knew exactly how to prune and shape the trees so their magnificent cascades of blossoms would perfectly frame the distant mountain vistas. Furthermore, she had laid intricate stone paths designed to guide every visitor to experience each tree from its most visually impactful angle. Yet, Yuki harbored a problem that caused her deep distress. Every year, just as her gardens attained their peak, glorious beauty, the fragile cherry blossoms inevitably began to fall. Within a mere few days, the magnificent spectacle she had labored all year to create would vanish, leaving behind only the sober green leaves where stunning flowers had previously exploded in color. This profound fleetingness, the ephemeral nature of the blossoms invariably filled her with a profound mix of sadness and frustration. Why? She often lamented to herself, sweeping the accumulating drifts of fallen petals from her paths. Must beauty so exquisite be so fleeting? If only she could somehow compel the blossoms to remain longer, she believed, then people could truly savor and appreciate their full glory. Driven by this wish, Yuki began a series of earnest experiments, seeking ways to artificially extend the blooming period. She applied various fertilizers, constructed small, makeshift shelters to protect the delicate flowers from harsh wind and heavy rain, and even attempted to coat select blossoms with a clear preserving substance. But all her attempts were futile. The cherry blossoms rigidly followed their inherent, natural rhythm, bursting into glorious bloom and then gracefully falling away, completely impervious to her painstaking efforts to control their fate. One soft spring morning, as Yuki stood sadly sweeping yet another substantial pile of fallen petals, an elderly monk appeared silently on the path. He walked slowly, pausing often to contemplate the trees, despite the fact that the vast majority of the blossoms had already dropped. "Excuse me," Yuki called out to him, a hint of weariness in her voice. "You've come too late. The peak blooming period was last week. There's really not much left of the spectacle to see now." The monk appeared genuinely surprised by her remark. "Too late? But I can observe many beautiful things right now." He gently gestured toward a nearby tree where the last few tenacious blossoms still clung to branches that were already prominently displaying fresh, vibrant green leaves. "Look how lovely this moment is," he murmured. "The old blossoms are beautifully saying their goodbye while the promise of new life simultaneously begins." Yuki followed his gaze, but she could only see the faded remnants of what had been undeniably more breathtaking just days before. "But you truly should have witnessed it last week," she insisted. "When every tree was in full bloom, that was when it was truly magnificent." The old monk simply smiled, then sat down calmly on a cool stone bench beneath the nearly bare branches. "Tell me about that day," he invited. Yuki's eyes instantly brightened as she enthusiastically described the peak bloom. Every single tree was completely enveloped in perfect clouds of pink and white flowers, she recounted. The air was heavy and sweet with their delicate fragrance. Visitors walked the paths in absolute wonder. Some of them even moved to tears by the sheer beauty. It truly felt like paradise itself. "It sounds absolutely wonderful," the monk agreed gently. "And how did you feel during that perfect day?" Yuki paused, retrieving the memory. "I felt anxious, actually," she confessed. "Even while people were lavishly praising the beauty, I was constantly worried about exactly how long it would last. I kept vigilantly looking for the first subtle signs that the petals were beginning to fall. I realized I couldn't fully enjoy the magnificent moment because I was already intensely dreading its inevitable end. The monk nodded thoughtfully, digesting her confession. "And how do you feel now, a week later?" "Sad?" Yuki replied quietly. "Empty. Almost like the entire year of careful work was ultimately wasted because the magnificent beauty was so terribly brief." The old monk remained quiet for a long, reflective moment, watching the final few remaining petals gently drift and settle on the earth. Then he posed a radical question. What if the brevity of the blooming is not the enemy of beauty, but, in fact, the very source of it? Yuki looked genuinely confused by the profound reversal of her logic. "What exactly do you mean? Tell me," the monk began. "Would people undertake long journeys from distant provinces just to see the cherry blossoms if they were guaranteed to bloom all year? Would visitors walk your paths moved to tears if the flowers lasted reliably for months on end? Would you, yourself, truly treasure the sight of full bloom if it were permanently available?" Yuki had never once considered the phenomenon from this completely different perspective. "I suppose not," she admitted slowly. "If cherry blossoms bloomed constantly, they would simply become commonplace, ordinary." "Exactly," the monk confirmed, smiling gently. "The very quality that causes you such sadness, the brief, temporary nature of the blossoms, is precisely what makes them so profoundly precious. Their breathtaking beauty is utterly inseparable from their essential impermanence. When people look at the cherry blossoms, they are not merely observing pretty flowers," he continued. "They are witnessing the poignant truth that all exquisite things must eventually pass away, and this deep knowledge makes the beauty infinitely more meaningful." He gestured toward the nearly bare tree providing their shade. "This tree will now offer you a new gift. In just a few short weeks, it will provide fresh, cooling green shade for summer visitors. In autumn, it will display brilliant, fiery-colored leaves. And in winter, it will elegantly reveal the profound skeletal structure of its bare branches. Each season holds its own unique beauty, but only because each season has the wisdom and grace to let go when its natural time is completely finished." As they continued to sit together, Yuki began to regard her beloved garden with startlingly different eyes. The fallen petals scattered across the path were suddenly no longer merely debris that needed scrubbing away, but rather undeniable evidence of a beauty that had been fully expressed and completed its cycle. The vibrant green leaves beginning to emerge were not inferior replacements for the flowers, but the necessary next chapter in the tree's powerful, ongoing story. "I have been fighting against the very essential quality that makes my garden special," she realized with a jolt. "I wanted desperately to freeze time at the moment of peak beauty, but doing so would fundamentally destroy the very power contained within that beauty." The monk stood up slowly, ready to continue his journey. "The cherry blossoms," he observed, "have been teaching the deepest truth about life for centuries. They demonstrate that because things inevitably pass away, each and every moment is rendered utterly irreplaceable. Because beauty is inherently temporary, it demands our complete, undivided attention and appreciation. When we truly grasp the concept of impermanence," he concluded, "we do not love things less. We learn to love them infinitely more fully." From that transformative day forward, Yuki's entire relationship with her cherished garden was irrevocably changed. She continued to work diligently, cultivating the best possible conditions for blooming, but she ceased fighting against the magnificent, natural cycle of flowering and fading. During peak bloom, instead of being consumed by anxiety over its imminent ending, she would sit quietly among the trees, completely absorbing and drinking in their beauty. And when the delicate petals began their cascade downward, instead of succumbing to sadness, she learned to appreciate the graceful, perfect way the blossoms had completed their brief dance, making necessary space for the next stage of growth. Visitors immediately noticed the subtle, profound change in Yuki. She appeared more present and deeply peaceful, more able to genuinely share in their sense of wonder, rather than being internally distracted by her own controlling concerns. The garden itself seemed somehow more breathtaking, not because the flowers endured longer, but because the dedicated gardener had finally learned to love them exactly as they were. Temporary and ultimately perfect. This powerful story elegantly reveals one of Buddhism's most profound and challenging teachings, the inherent nature of impermanence, anicca. We are often conditioned to believe that if we could only make beautiful moments endure forever, we would achieve lasting happiness. Yet, the truth is precisely the opposite. The temporary, fleeting nature of our experiences is what grants them their true preciousness and profound power to move us. When we truly internalize impermanence, we cease wasting energy trying desperately to grasp and rigidly hold onto fleeting moments. Instead, we learn the art of being completely present for them while they are here. Just like Yuki, whose anxiety about the blossoms fading prevented her from enjoying them fully, we too often miss the quiet beauty of the present moment because we are preoccupied with worrying about its inevitable conclusion. This teaching fundamentally transforms how we interact with everything and everyone we cherish. Instead of feeling paralyzed by the sobering knowledge that good times will eventually pass, we become liberated by it. Each moment immediately becomes precious precisely because it is finite and will never be replicated. Each experience shared with loved ones gains profound meaning because our collective time together is inherently limited. Each new day is accepted as an irreplaceable gift because we understand it is never guaranteed. The Buddhist insight into impermanence is emphatically not intended to cultivate sadness or pessimism. Its purpose is instead to radically wake us up to the incredible, irreplaceable value of what is occurring right now. When we cease resisting the natural, constant flow of change and, instead, learn to genuinely appreciate each unfolding stage of life, we uncover a deeper well of peace and gratitude than any futile attempt to freeze time could ever possibly deliver. Take a gentle, conscious breath and feel how this deeper understanding cultivates both tenderness and profound appreciation for this very moment. Notice how knowing that this peaceful time won't last forever makes it significantly more precious, not less. This acceptance of impermanence is a powerful gift. Let us now explore this wisdom further through another compelling story, one that demonstrates how accepting the temporary nature of life can, paradoxically, make us more intensely alive and deeply present. In a quiet, remote mountain village, there lived an elderly doctor named Kenji who had dedicated his entire career to caring for the needs of his small community. His assistant, a young, observant nurse named May, was deeply puzzled by this radical transformation. One afternoon, as Dr. Kenji was diligently painting a picture of a single, exquisite flower arranged in a small vase, she finally felt compelled to ask him about the profound change she had observed. "Doctor, please forgive me for being so direct, but you seem happier now than I have ever witnessed, even though you are facing such an incredibly difficult situation. How is this humanly possible?" Dr. Kenji gently set down his brush and offered the young woman a serene smile. "May, do you know what the most profound discovery was when I learned I was dying? What? I discovered that I had been dying all along. We all are, continuously. The only crucial difference now is that I know approximately how much time remains, and this sharp, definite knowledge has become the most powerful teacher I have ever known." May still looked confused by his paradox. "For 70 years, Dr. Kenji continued, clarifying his thought, I lived my life as if I possessed unlimited time. I would habitually put off deep conversations with old friends, always rationalizing that I would call them next month. I would rush through meals merely to get to the next urgent task, falsely assuming I could properly enjoy food someday when I wasn't quite so busy. I would notice a beautiful sunset, but I rarely paused long enough to truly appreciate it, convinced there would invariably be another, better sunset tomorrow. He gestured toward the flower he had been carefully painting. But when you fully recognize that your time is sharply limited, suddenly everything becomes intensely precious. This single flower will inevitably fade in a few short days, and I may not be present to witness many more flowers after this season. So I paint it now with my complete, focused attention, as if it is the most significant flower that has ever blossomed. Dr. Kenji slowly stood up and walked toward the sunlit window. Look at those mountains, May. I have been looking at them every day for 40 years, yet I was usually far too preoccupied with my work to truly see them. Now that I understand I won't be gazing upon them for much longer, each viewing feels nothing short of a profound miracle. May began to connect the pieces. You're saying that the sharp awareness of death actually makes life exponentially more meaningful. Not just knowing about death intellectually, May, but truly and fully accepting that our time is fundamentally limited. Dr. Kenji clarified gently. Most people intellectually acknowledge that they will die someday, yet they organize their lives as if they have an eternity at their disposal. When you truly accept impermanence, not viewing it as a sad, dark fact, but as the inherent condition that renders each moment utterly irreplaceable, everything changes. He returned to his painting, adding careful, loving details to the flower's petals. I am not happy because I am dying, May. I am happy because I am finally, authentically living. For the first time in decades, I am no longer postponing my life, waiting for some future, perfect moment to begin appreciating what I possess. I am here, now, completely present for whatever time remains. This final story beautifully integrates all the profound teachings we have explored throughout this peaceful journey. The young monk's desperate searching mirrors our own persistent, restless quest for a superior experience, always believing true happiness resides elsewhere, in some future achievement. Yet, Chiyo's tranquil, uncomplicated presence illuminates the foundational truth of all Buddhist wisdom. Everything we truly seek is inherently here, fully available, and perfectly complete, exactly as this moment is unfolding. Together, we have traversed the landscape of acceptance and letting go, compassion and mindfulness, wisdom and the freedom of non-attachment. Through this exploration, we have realized that our true, essential nature is not some deep secret, but plainly obvious. Not complicated or hard to grasp, but beautifully simple. And certainly not distant, but deeply present in every single breath we take. Every single narrative has guided us toward the same essential, unchanging truth. Peace is not a destination we must labor to construct, but a fundamental reality we reveal simply by ceasing our relentless struggle against what is. Like the monk finally relaxing on Chiyo's quiet porch, we encounter the deepest possible rest only when we stop trying so desperately hard to track it down. The most profound spiritual wisdom unfolds when we become utterly present to the quiet, simple reality of this immediate moment. The sudden arrival of a bird at our feet, the automatic movement of breath through our lungs, the spacious awareness that is registering these words right now. These are, in fact, our greatest and most immediate teachers. Take a deep, slow, intentional breath, and allow this profound understanding to settle gently into your physical body, like the comforting sensation of warm water washing over you. For so long you have sought peace and wisdom externally, yet they have been waiting here all along, not as difficult future achievements, but simply as the natural, luminous state of your awareness when it finally relaxes its tenacious grip on needing things to be different. Let us anchor ourselves in this recognition through one final, ancient story, a tale designed to bring us fully home to the secure sanctuary of our own peaceful nature. Master Run had dedicated 5 decades to guiding students through the intricacies of Buddhist practice and philosophy. His temple achieved widespread fame throughout the region, drawing pilgrims who would travel enormous distances to attend his famous lectures and receive his authoritative guidance. He was revered equally for his vast scriptural knowledge and his unique ability to articulate clear answers to even the most complex spiritual inquiries. As the master aged, however, a subtle but significant transformation began to manifest in his teaching methodology. Instead of offering the long, elaborate explanations that made him famous, he started addressing student inquiries with increasingly simple, almost spare answers. Rather than assigning complicated, demanding practices, he now merely suggested that his students sit quietly and focus on their breath. This shift left some of his disciples bewildered. They had arrived eager for profound, esoteric teachings and sophisticated spiritual disciplines, only to find their revered master offering what seemed like nothing more than the most elementary instructions learned years ago. One calm evening, a senior student approached Master Run, his face etched with genuine concern. "Master, your recent teaching seems so fundamentally different from what you taught us before. Are you feeling well? Have you perhaps forgotten the deeper aspects of the Dharma?" Master Run responded with a gentle smile and invited his student to join him on the temple porch, settling down just as the first evening stars began to pierce the deep violet of the darkening sky. "Tell me," the master inquired softly, "when you first arrived to study here 10 years ago, what exactly were you hoping to find?" "I was seeking enlightenment, liberation from suffering, and a complete understanding of ultimate reality," the student readily replied. "And have you found these things?" The student paused thoughtfully. "I have learned a great deal, and my practice has certainly deepened, but I still have this persistent feeling that there is something more I need to grasp or somehow achieve." Master Ren pointed toward a particularly brilliant star that had just emerged in the fading light of twilight. "Do you see that star?" "Yes, Master." "What is it doing?" The student appeared confused by the simplicity of the question. As they remained seated together in the profound quiet of the night, the student felt his usually churning mind gradually subside, settling into an inherent and natural stillness. The pressing questions and relentless seeking that typically occupied his thoughts seemed to effortlessly dissolve into the peaceful, expansive vastness of the evening. He wasn't consciously trying to meditate or force himself to achieve any particular elevated state. He was simply present, just like the stars, simply shining. "Master," he whispered, "I believe I finally understand why your teaching has become so extraordinarily simple." "Why is that?" "Because the very thing we are seeking is already so fundamentally simple and direct that complicated teachings only serve to obscure and cover it up." Master Ren nodded slowly. "After 50 years devoted to teaching, I have confirmed that the most profound and essential truth is always the most obvious one. Students arrive seeking complex, esoteric wisdom, but what they truly need is only to remember how to effortlessly rest in their own natural, unbound awareness." He stood up slowly, preparing to withdraw inside for the night. "The stars have faithfully offered this same immutable teaching every night for millions of years," he said. "They shine simply because shining is their inherent nature, not because they are striving to achieve some external goal. When we, too, discover that we can simply be what we already are, without the exhausting struggle to become something else, we simultaneously find the peace that has eternally been available." That night, the student experienced a sleep deeper and more restorative than any he had known in years. This wasn't because he had acquired some brand new piece of intellectual knowledge, but because he had finally surrendered and relaxed into something ancient, natural, and perpetually present. He had realized that the peace he had spent years searching for was simply the peace of awareness itself, not an achievement to be earned, but his foundational, inherent nature. This concluding narrative brings our entire journey full circle, returning us to our starting point but now endowed with the profound, embodied understanding that only traveling the path can provide. We began this exploration seeking personal transformation and enduring peace. We have now found them not waiting as distant, difficult goals, but realized that they are the very ground upon which we have been resting all along. Feel your body sinking deeper now, completely supported by the cushion or surface beneath you. Notice your breathing naturally beginning to slow and deepen as your nervous system instinctively recognizes the absolute safety and stillness of this present moment. Feel your mind naturally quieting, discovering that it holds no further obligation to search for something superior anywhere else. You have now received the transmission of teachings that have successfully guided countless sentient beings toward genuine freedom for more than 2 millennia. These ancient wisdoms have traversed vast distances of time and space to find you, reaching your awareness much like the light from a distant star finally reaches your eyes. They have successfully planted seeds deep within the fertile ground of your awareness, seeds that will continue to grow and blossom in their own perfect, natural time. There remains nothing more you need to actively do tonight, nothing left to achieve or intellectually figure out. The path you have illuminated with these teachings moves forward not through struggle or intense effort, but through the simple, gentle remembering of who and what you have always fundamentally been. Like water naturally finding its lowest level, or like the stars simply shining, your deepest peace will emerge, not through any kind of forcing, but entirely through allowing. Our gentle, shared journey through these timeless, essential teachings now gracefully draws to its completion. We have walked together through illuminating stories of acceptance and surrender, of boundless compassion and attentive mindfulness, of penetrating wisdom and ultimate freedom. We have recognized that the peace we crave is not located somewhere far off, but is utterly present within this very moment. It is not a trophy to be achieved, but a foundational reality to be recognized. The great ancient masters who first articulated these truths now rest harmoniously with you in the quiet, spacious chamber of your own awareness. You carry within your very being the identical Buddha nature that awakened centuries ago within them. As you sleep, these potent teachings will continue their silent, profound work, settling into the deeper layers of your existence, like potent seeds nourished within fertile ground. There is genuinely nothing more required of you this night. Allow your entire body to sink fully into deep, complete rest, trusting that profound wisdom operates most effectively in stillness. Permit your breathing to slow and deepen organically as your mind willingly releases the concerns and stresses of the day. The deep, restorative peace you have connected with through these stories is perpetually available, always waiting for your conscious return. Thank you for walking this profound path alongside Sleepy Monk. May you rest profoundly within the secure sanctuary of your own peaceful nature. May you awaken tomorrow with a soft, gentle remembering of the astonishing simplicity that dwells at your absolute center. Peace comes from within. Never seek it outside yourself. Tonight, you successfully turned inward and confirmed that this ancient, immutable truth still holds absolute power. The peace you have experienced is not conditional upon achieving perfect external circumstances or the absence of difficult problems. It is purely and simply the natural state of awareness when it stops fighting against what is. The great Zen masters knew with certainty that enlightenment is not some distant peak demanding years of specialized, arduous effort. It is merely the simple recognition of the sacred truth that has always been present. Like the flawless reflection of the moon in undisturbed water, your fundamental Buddha nature has been quietly shining all along, waiting only for the waves of mental turbulence to settle and subside. In this profound stillness, you remember what the ancients lovingly called your original face, the pristine, pure awareness that existed long before you ever learned to conceive of yourself as separate from the greater whole. The middle way that the Buddha trod, charting a balanced course between extremes of luxury and relentless hardship, is alive and functioning within your breath right now. Neither forcing nor resisting, simply allowing. The deep well of compassion, which flows naturally from truly understanding our shared human suffering, gently opens in your heart as you prepare to rest. The liberating wisdom of impermanence, which teaches us to hold all things lightly, settles into the deepest part of your bones. You are not just learning about these teachings tonight. You are, in the deepest sense, becoming them. Rest now in the great, foundational silence that effortlessly holds all sounds, the immeasurable vast space that tenderly embraces all experience. The ancestors smile in recognition as yet another being finally remembers the way home. It has truly been a wonderful, sacred journey shared with you here tonight.